All right, another happy landing.
It's a good way to start.
Right on time.
We have never been late for a podcast ever.
A wizard is never late. He arrives precisely when he means to.
Yeah, no, I'll take ownership for that. It was my main idea to upgrade the podcast, and we attempted to do it for Weird Bible as a trial run, not realizing even remotely how much longer we needed to actually get it right. So the delay was entirely just us trying to make the regular stream work. So sorry about that.
Yeah, so it's all good. The show will hopefully work when we bring regular Lore Lodge back in a couple of weeks. Anyway, yeah, so we thought of all the times of year to discuss the resurrection of Jesus Christ, this was probably it. Being that Good Friday is tomorrow. Just as one does. But every single year, two things happen when Easter rolls around. Everybody gets together. All the Christians do the Christian thing of enjoying, the Lord's resurrection, all that. Passover is also about the same time, but that's a different thing. We've talked about Passover and how that came to be on a much earlier episode of the show. But of course, Passover being at the same time as the crucifixion, the sacrifice, the resurrection, all of that is important. There is a reason that the events happened the way they did at the time they did. And so we felt that this is one of those stories that basically every Christian knows the general aspects of Easter, that we have Christ is on the cross, Christ forgives, I believe it's a thief, right, Isaiah?
Yes, the thief on the cross. Also, hi everyone, I'm Isaiah.
Yeah, I figured I probably should have given a regular introduction. I just figure everybody.
No, you're I'm just goofing. Yeah, it's fine.
So this is one of those stories. I think it's, in my opinion, a lot like when we covered Samson and Jonah, where everybody knows the basics. This man was crucified for God, for so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. But it goes much deeper. There's a lot more to it, as with everything in the Bible. And I figured the best way that we could cover the subject would be to start by talking about, the historical context here. What was going on? And then we'll go into, what Easter actually is, the prophecies it fulfills, and then we'll cover the part I'm sure everyone is wondering, which is, why do I keep hearing people say that Easter is pagan? Because Easter is not pagan. What?
How many people are saying Easter's pagan? Also, I figured I would fit the vibe a little more.
Yeah, but this has become very popular lately to just hop on TikTok or Twitter or whatever and say, "Oh, you see, Easter, it comes from Ishtar." But we'll save that for the end. So Isaiah, I guess to kind of set the scene for you to go into the Lord and his day. In the year, we're talking about sometime between the years of 33 AD or possibly 29 AD. We don't know precisely when Jesus actually died. Traditionally, it is 33 AD. It's believed that he may have been born several years earlier than 1 AD, so we're not entirely sure, but we're talking around the year 30 AD. The Roman Empire the Roman Empire has just come into existence. The king of Israel, of Judea, was Herod at one point. The Romans kind of got into a position where having Judea lead itself entirely was not going to work. They needed to establish a Roman prefecture. It was still called Judea at the time. It was not yet Palestine. We can get into why it became Palestine later. It was primarily as an insult to the Jewish people to rename it in the guise of their ancient enemy, the Philistines. But at the time, it's Judea. It is a Roman province. It is led by a Roman governor. At the same time, the Jews, for the most part, lead themselves. They make most of their own laws, and it's really just the Romans are there to make sure that they're falling in line with Roman law and not doing anything that the Romans don't permit. We actually see, I believe it's Paul ends up later on going to the Romans and requesting that he have the protection of Roman law over Jewish law so that he can be tried in a Roman court rather than the Sanhedrin, if I'm not mistaken. Isaiah?
Yes. Correct. What he said.
I love having you here to fact check me in real time. So that's kind of the reason that when we get to the crucifixion itself, we have Pontius Pilate say, "I wash my hands of this," is because as far as the Romans were concerned, this whole thing with Jesus and the Pharisees wasn't really their problem. They didn't particularly care. this was, again, as they considered it, this was just another couple of these provincial religions squabbling amongst each other. They had seen the same thing with the Celts, with the Numidians, with the Carthaginians. Well, not the Carthaginians so much. They had a very organized priesthood, and the Romans were scared of it because they sacrificed babies. Terrible, terrible thing. But yeah, they saw this with most of the stuff. Most of the groups that they saw as either too small or too unsophisticated. They would usually just go, all right, you guys do your own thing. Whatever. For example, the Jews did not acknowledge the Roman emperor or the Roman gods as being legitimate or real, which was a problem for the Romans. So they made a deal where they said, hey, as long as you guys sacrifice to your god in our favor, we're cool. You do your thing. Later on, there would be some issues where Christians don't sacrifice, so the Romans didn't really see Christianity as a religion so much as a political ideology or a philosophy, and they suppressed it as a result. But that's where we are by the time we get to the crucifixion of Christ. Judea is a Roman province that is largely but not totally autonomous, and the Roman government really doesn't see Christianity as anything besides a small sect of what is already a small religion. Until we get to the Last Supper. So Isaiah, you want to take us through how we get to the crucifixion and resurrection?
Yep, sounds good to me. Also, it's interesting that part you mentioned about the Romans don't really view Christianity as a religion post crucifixion. That actually comes up directly within the book of Acts, because when I think his name was Caiaphas, he was a Roman senator who was visited by an angel. So he has Peter come to tell him of Christianity, and his biggest hangup with Christianity is, where's the sacrifice? He doesn't he's like, it can't be a religion without the blood spilling. What does your sacrifice mean? And Peter gets to be like, well, that's because we had one sacrifice, one that is done once and for all. But anyway, yeah, interesting point. So before all that happens, before Roman Christianity, before Peter has to go be the head of the church and all that, Jesus Christ, his ministry on earth, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. If you're not, go back and watch some more episodes of the show, I guess. Jesus Christ was kind of the point of the entire Bible, right? At the beginning of the Bible, humanity separated itself from God through sin, with the promise that one day God would come to earth to bring us back to him, Jesus being the vehicle by which that is to happen. So Jesus Christ comes to earth in the form of a man. He lives a perfect life. He teaches his word. He ministers unto people, performs miracles, and the Pharisees do not like that. So for some context, because there's a lot of confusion around this topic, the Jewish religion of the time was the same religion that Christianity is now, minus Jesus, right?
Yep.
So they had all the same history. They had the same beliefs. They had the same belief that one day a savior would come to the people that would cleanse them of their sins. It was just the Pharisees did not believe Jesus to be that savior. So therefore, because Jesus was not the savior, but he was saying he was, that makes him a heretic. And as a matter of fact, a particularly effective heretic, because if Jesus is not the Son of God, then he is convincing a whole lot of people that he is. So the Pharisees want him dead. Eventually, they do this. They know they can't arrest him publicly and make a whole scene because he has so much support behind him, and he outright hasn't done anything wrong. He has broken the law by saying that he is Christ, the Son of God, but there's a lot of people who believe he is the Son of God. So they need it to be discreet. So the way that they decide they're going to get him is they're going to have one of his followers betray him. This is actually something that was prophesized all the way back in the Old Testament, that one of his very own would betray him. And of course, as we all probably know, that follower that decided to betray him was Judas Iscariot. He goes and visits the Pharisees. The Pharisees give him 20 or 30 pieces of silver. I think it's 30.
I think it's 30.
Okay.
That sounds right to me.
Yeah, a certain number, an amount that does not equal betraying God, whatever amount it is.
What would you do for a Klondike bar?
Yeah, yeah. Would you cast humanity to damnation? Yeah. Anyway, so one night after Jesus arrives in Jerusalem, and it was foretold that he would be, killed in Jerusalem, Jesus has all of his disciples together for something that's known as the Last Supper. Again, all of them were Jewish. They were all of the Jewish faith and tradition. So the Passover, which is a celebration of the Passover that occurred in Egypt during the time of Jewish slavery back in the book of Genesis with Moses and all that, or book of Exodus, I mean. It's interesting how one of our last stories of Jesus with his disciples is a reminiscence of another story from earlier in the Bible, another thing that God did. So during the Passover dinner, they are communing, they are talking together, and Jesus tells them that one of you is going to betray me tonight. And all of the disciples are clueless as to who it is. Something else I want to point out is a lot of people kind of have this idea, mostly because of depictions that were made of him after the fact, that Judas was kind of like this conniving, sort of ratty person, like dastardly almost. But for the past decades, he was one of the brothers, right?
Yep.
He was close with Jesus. He communed with him. He was a disciple among him. He was as much a follower of Christ as everyone else in the room was.
Yeah, if you were to put this, I was just gonna say, if you were to put this on a TV show, this would come as a major plot twist.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, effectively.
This is the red wedding of the Bible.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Oh gosh. Thank you. It's actually in the Last Supper that a ton of the at least from the book of John, a ton of the lessons and stories that Jesus gives us comes forward. So like, for example, John 14, which is one of the most famous parts in the whole Bible, especially to people when it comes to salvation or the afterlife. Let not your heart be troubled. Ye that believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go to prepare a place for you, then I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, ye may be also. So we have, like, it's such a beautiful picture that Jesus knows what's about to happen. He knows where all of this is going. And in his last moments with not only his disciples, but his friends who have been with him for all of these years, he's comforting them. They don't know why he's doing it, but he knows why he's doing it, saying that I'm going to go away. Life's going to be hard, but I promise at the end of this, all that stuff we talked about, it's going to be worth it. It's really a beautiful picture of like, there's a reason Christ was known as the comforter to those around him. But it's during the Last Supper that we see a ton of these different teachings that we would later go on to tell that a lot of people don't even realize was given during the Last Supper. Another thing Jesus does during the Last Supper is he washes the disciples' feet. So foot washing was a sign of respect. I mean, to some degree, it is nowadays, but back then in biblical times, it was a much more common occurrence because people wore sandals everywhere and walked through the sand. So people's feet would often be nasty and you wouldn't want to wear them in the house. So there would be house servants, or perhaps the lady of the house would wash the feet of guests. Of course, the disciples see Jesus as the Son of God. So Jesus washing their feet is a huge step. Peter, as a matter of fact, whenever Jesus starts to wash his own feet, says, "My Lord, don't do that. Let me wash yours." And Jesus effectively tells him to calm down, because the purpose of this is as an example to the brethren. Regardless of who you are, regardless of how high and mighty you think you are, we're in this world together. You're supposed to help each other get along, and that means sometimes bowing down to people who otherwise you may not want to. One of the most powerful images of that night, a lot of people overlook, is Jesus would have washed Judas's feet during that, knowing exactly what was about to happen. Yeah. So anyway, we have the Last Supper. It's their time together, and Jesus knows what's about to happen. So all the disciples are gathered around him, and Jesus says, "One of you is going to betray me tonight." And the disciples begin to talk amongst themselves. They begin to ask questions of who it might be. I'm sure several people have seen the Da Vinci painting of the Last Supper, which is supposed to be a depiction of this moment. Everyone whispering to each other, moving around the table, trying to figure out what's going on. So Jesus takes a piece of bread and dips it in a cup, which also during the Last Supper, he broke the bread and he parted out the drink and said at that thing, "This is my body, this is my blood, do in remembrance of me." And that's where we get communion from the from the series of events that Jesus did at the Last Supper. A lot happened at the Last Supper that worked its way into Christianity. I mean, for good reason. It was his last teaching to the disciples as a man on earth.
And surely,
So-
2,000 years later, there would not be any argument over what he meant by "this is my body and this is my blood." That would definitely be very clear to everybody.
Yeah, very one of those set in stone kind of things, I guess. Yeah. So anyway, he had already done that earlier in the night. So at this point, he takes the bread, he dips it in the wine, and he hands it to Judas and says, "What thou must do, do quickly." So basically, he says, one of you is going to betray me, hands bread to him and says, "What you're going to do, do it quick." And then Judas leaves the room. And again, to paint the picture for how much Judas was one of them, the disciples talking to each other assumed that Jesus sent Judas to go get something,
Mhm.
maybe more food, maybe to grab something. It never even crosses their minds that Judas would be one to betray them. So it says from there, Judas departs out, and then hold on, let me get. I have a comedically large Bible.
No, you're fine. Look for it. I was just gonna say,
This.
when I think about it, it does bear some parallels if you think about the relationship between God himself and the character of Lucifer / Satan, the Satan, the angel.
Yeah.
When you see, this is a figure who is part of God's council. This is one of his highest angels, and yet he rebels.
Real quick, in this instance at the Last Supper, has he already made up his mind?
He's already taken the money, I believe.
Okay.
No. He hasn't taken the money yet. He had planned to go meet them to take the money.
So the reason I asked that question is because it almost seems, I would imagine this may be the point of the decision on Christ's perspective, essentially, but him excusing Judas is providing him the opportunity to go meet them, right? Almost in the sense of like he is actively setting the plan in motion. He is actively,
he knows where this is going.
Yes. And he's essentially not only allowing it, but he is be actively participating in it in a way.
Yes, absolutely. He knows what must happen, and that's apparent in the things that happen immediately after this. So I'm going between the Gospels right now, maybe chasing my place a little bit. So right after this happens, we have the Garden of Gethsemane, which is, in my opinion, one of the most heartbreaking moments in the entire Bible, and something I find myself thinking about a lot. So after that, let me make sure Luke's the right one. Yes, here it is. Okay. So after that, after Judas goes out, he predicts Peter's denial. He says to Simon, which is Simon Peter, it says, this is going off of Luke chapter 22, verse 31. And the Lord said, "Simon, Simon, behold, Satan hath desired to have you, that he may sift you as wheat," saying that the devil's going to try to get a hold of Peter. "But I have prayed for thee, that thy faith fail not. And when thou art converted, strengthen thy brethren." And he said unto him, "Lord, I am ready to go with thee, both into prison and to death." See, Peter, while he's next to Jesus, is saying, "I'll die for you right now. Like, just say the word." And he said, Jesus talking, "I tell thee, Peter, the cock shall not crow this day before thou shalt thrice deny that thou knowest me." He's saying this same day before the morning rises and the rooster crows, you're going to deny me 3 times. And of course, Peter thinks this is impossible. I don't know what he's talking about, but as we're going to find out, he knows exactly, Jesus knows where this is going. He sees Peter, what he's saying in the faith, but he knows where Peter's going to end up. So he asks Peter, John, and James, if I recall right. I think that he brings 3 of them. Right. I think it's those 3. I know it's John.
Definitely John and Peter.
I think James is the 3rd.
Anyway, so
he has them go out with him to a nearby garden in town known as Gethsemane. And it says, and he came out and went, and he was wont to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples also followed him. It doesn't say in the book of Luke what the 3 were, but in other accounts it gives the 3 names.
Luke was, just for context for those watching, Luke did not personally know Christ. I believe he was assigned by Paul.
So he was a convert of Christ right after the crucifixion. he was a doctor,
Mhm.
and he was like highly respected in the Jewish community enough. So, there's actually some belief that he wasn't even Jewish, that he was just of a different tradition and
Yeah.
like lived nearby. But basically, he had the means to travel a lot and to keep records. So he made it his life's journey after he was saved to go and meet with all the disciples and everyone that knew Jesus and effectively create a combination of all their accounts.
Yep.
So that's what the book of Luke is.
It is a little funny whenever people are like, "Well, Luke didn't even know Jesus," and you're like, he basically was an investigative journalist collecting people's
Yeah. So
accounts.
the reason the gospels are ordered in the way they are, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, is because Matthew and Mark were two disciples of Jesus who talked about their time with Jesus. Luke is kind of a conglomeration of all of the disciples' discussion with Jesus. And then John, who was a disciple of Jesus, isn't so much as a straight one-for-one historical telling as much as it is about the teachings of Jesus. John is much more spiritual, faith-based, stuff like that. He still talks about the events that Matthew, Mark, and Luke do, but like the opening of John is, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was talking about it in a way that the previous three touched on.
Yeah, it's you get a really interesting, just from the first three, you do get a really interesting set though, because Matthew was an apostle. Matthew walked with Christ. Luke was led by the apostles, was informed by the apostles, and Mark was a teenager when Jesus was preaching. So you get these three really cool discussions, and you can see it in Mark's writing that he was definitely younger. It's a shorter account by far than the other two, and it seems like it's it seems like it's the first one that was written out of all of them, just based on what's in it and the structure. But I just think it's very interesting that what we get in those four gospels is we get somebody who was an adolescent, we get somebody who knew him personally, we get somebody who didn't know him at all, and then we get the apostle whom he loved, who's telling about who Jesus was, not just as the story, but as a person and as a teacher and a guide. I think there's a reason that those four were selected out of the other gospels, quote unquote.
I think John is by far my favorite, just the way that he talks about a lot of the events. I'm actually going to use John a lot for the crucifixion stuff when we get to it. But anyway, so they go to Gethsemane that night. He goes again with John, Peter, and James. And it says, when he was at the place, he said unto them, "Pray that ye enter not into temptation." And he was withdrawn from them about a stone's cast, and kneeled down and prayed. So in other accounts, we hear that the disciples fell asleep. He was in the garden for some time. So Jesus slips off by himself to a stone that's in the middle of the garden, and he begins to pray. And Jesus's prayer, knowing that he is about to be betrayed, arrested, beat, tortured, crucified, is he prays to God and says, "Father, if thou be willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done." One of the most, I personally think that's the most heartbreaking verse in the entire Bible. It is Jesus Christ. He is part of God. He has been there from the beginning. He knows all the stories. He knows the legends. He has spent the last 33 years of his life on earth waiting for this moment. And here in the garden, he says, "If there be any other way, please don't make me go through this." It's humanity. It's God is perfectly God and man, right? So he has all of the emotions. He wasn't sinful, but he has all the emotions, the effects of man, right? And here in this moment, knowing what's coming to happen, if there be any other way, let it pass from me. But not my will, but thine be done. If this is the way it must happen, so be it. It breaks my heart. The thought of God crying, right? For what we're about to do to him, it kills me. And it says after that, it says, "And there appeared an angel unto him from heaven, strengthening him. And being in an agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was as it were great drops of blood falling down to the ground. And when he rose up from prayer, and he was come to his disciples, he found them sleeping for sorrow, and said unto them, Why sleep ye? Rise and play, lest ye enter into temptation." Again, trying to have his friends there to comfort him, because he knows what he's about to go through. In the account of, I want to say it's Matthew, when Peter awakes, he looks over to Jesus and sees that Jesus is talking to two people. and that those two people he is speaking to is Elijah and Moses.
Mhm.
It is Moses, correct? Yes, Elijah
I'm
and
almost
Moses.
positive it's Moses.
That's it's such a quick mention in the Bible. That is one of the most beautiful passages in the entire Bible. Think about this from I know we're not even to the crucifixion yet, but think about this from the point of view of Moses and Elijah, right? They were the Old Testament. They knew they were prophets of a Christ that was coming, but they never got to experience that Christ during their lifetime, right? They talked of God, they talked of the forgiveness of the Holy Spirit, but they never got to experience it firsthand. But their faith was strong enough. Sure, they faltered, sure, they were human, but in the end, their faith was strong enough that they were maintained as prophets, they were maintained as God's people. So to go through that, to be in heaven, and then when that same God you used to foretell of his coming is scared, is afraid on earth, you're the one who goes to comfort him. You're the one who goes to tell God it's going to be okay. The idea of like the righteousness of these two, of what they must have been like as people, and of what words must have been said. What do you tell to 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 stop God from being scared? It's man, and it's not only a God, it's your God. It's the one who's given you the experience in heaven that you've had. It's such a beautiful moment in the Bible. Anyway, so after that, the disciples are awoken, and sure enough, Judas Iscariot shows up to the Garden of Gethsemane. When Judas shows up to the garden, he comes with a group of Roman soldiers. He walks up to Jesus and kisses him on the cheek. This is because he told the soldiers, whichever one I kiss is Jesus. See, like this was ancient times, right? The Roman soldiers have heard of Jesus, but they've never seen him before.
Yeah.
So they get to the garden, they don't know who to arrest. So Judas says, whichever one I kiss, that's the one you arrest. It says Jesus comes and he kissed him, and Jesus said unto him, Judas, betrayest thou the Son of Man with a kiss? It says, and when they which were about him saw what would follow, they said unto him, Lord, shall we smite him with the sword? They're like, who we killing? What do you want us to do? Say it right now. And Peter pulls out his sword, swings it, and cuts off an ear of one of the soldiers.
Okay, wait, you're leaving a bit out here though that we need to address, which is that 3 of the Gospels say one of the apostles took a sword out and cut off his ear, and then John is just like, it was Peter.
Yeah. All the other 3 say one of them struck with the sword, and then John's like, Peter had a sword. Peter swung it at the soldier.
This is not the only time in this story that John will say something specific.
I can't wait to get to that. It's so fun. John cracks me up. But anyway,
also, wait, really quickly, how many of them and how frequently are they carrying swords?
They're probably all carrying swords.
Consistently?
When Christ met them, he said, carry your sword, and if you do not have one, sell your cloak and buy one.
Yeah, which there's some interesting stuff there as well, because the Roman laws about who could and could not own a sword were complicated. So there's a good chance these were not legal weapons.
There's also there's a during the Last Supper, actually, is when he says that, sell your cloak and buy a sword.
Yeah.
And Peter, I believe it says, is it not enough to walk in the faith? And Christ says, yea, the faith is more important. But lest the evils of man befall you, carry a sword.
Yeah. Jesus is basically saying, this is my sacrifice to make, not yours.
He was the pioneer of keep your rifle by your side.
Stay strapped or get clapped, the Lord saith.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Did they just slaughter all of the soldiers and Jesus walks in and it's just, who hath done this?
Yeah. I forgot about that from the who hath done this? Who set 300 foxes on fire? Anyway. So Jesus is then so anyway, Peter cuts off the ear of one of the soldiers. Jesus picks up the ear and reattaches it to the guy's head. So he puts the ear back on and tells Peter, that this is not the time to let this happen effectively, and Jesus is taken away by the Roman soldiers, which the goal of the Roman soldiers to watch a guy reattach a limb
Yep.
and then be like, you're under arrest. Anything you say can and will be used against you.
Exactly. It's like you'd think that this would give them some pause. Like, hang on a minute.
Yeah. That
People
guy
can't
put
just
an ear-
do that.
Yeah, that guy
Yeah.
just put an ear back on. Maybe we should
It
hear
was,
this
it, was,
guy
it was
out.
one of the soldiers themselves too that had his ear put
Yeah.
back on, right? So
You-
you'd have to imagine it's essentially an ATF agent or like a SWAT agent that's walked into this scenario, lost an ear, it is now back, and he's just standing there with the rest of his unit, like, okay.
Yeah, imagine you're the ATF agent. You're the first ATF agent to get shot at Waco, and David Koresh walks out and just heals you.
Yeah.
Like, that's essentially what happened here, except David Koresh absolutely would not be able to accomplish that
He pats
task.
your abdomen and puts your kidneys back together.
Exactly.
Thank you. Okay. So he gets arrested. I won't go through the entirety of John's account of the trial, but John has a lot to say about it. So Jesus is arrested, and as soon as he's arrested is when Peter denies him. So it says, and Simon Peter followed Jesus because after the arrest, he follows Jesus to where he's going. And another disciple, the disciple is known to the high priest and went in with Jesus into the palace of the high priest. So basically, one of the other disciples, probably John, I think. John also barely ever refers to himself
Yeah.
as John throughout his account. He just says a disciple was there. That's a common thing.
Yeah.
Until the very end of John, where he says, "I am the disciple for whom Jesus loved." And that's for the most part, I think that's kind of just him taking himself out of the equation, making it more about what Christ did. So I think it was John when it says the high priest knew that one of those two guys was Jesus's follower. So when they interrogate Jesus, they have John come in with him. So Peter is now left by himself outside of effectively the courtroom. It says, but Peter stood at the door without. Then went out that other disciple, which was known unto the high priest, again, probably John, and spake unto her that kept the door, and brought in Peter. Then saith the damsel that kept the door unto Peter, Art thou not also one of this man's disciples? And he saith, I am not. So here we have the first symptom of Peter's denial. Jesus is on trial, and it's a really big deal because the Pharisees don't take kindly to someone claiming to be God, right?
Nope.
As a matter of fact, that is an offense punishable by death. So the one guy gets brought into the courtroom with him because the high priest recognizes, like, oh, you're his follower. But Peter's kind of in the clear right now. Until, as he's being led in the front door, the girl says, say, aren't you also with that guy who's on trial in there for, blasphemy? And Peter says, I am not. After that, it says, and the servants and officers stood there who had made a fire of coals, for it was cold, and they warmed themselves. Peter stood with them and warmed himself. The high priest then asks, okay, so then it talks about the trial that's going on in there. And then we cut back to outside. It says, and Simon Peter stood and warmed himself, and they said unto him, art thou not also one of his disciples? He denied it and said, I am not. One of the servants of the high priest, being his kinsman, whose ear Peter cut off. So now a kinsman of the guy who Peter cut the ear off of. Again, this is John saying it was Peter who cut the ear off. One of the kinsmen of that guy saith, did not I see thee in the garden with him? Peter then denied again, and immediately the cock crew. So keep in mind, earlier this night, Peter was standing to Jesus saying, I will die with you in an instant. And Jesus said 3 times before the cock crows, before the morning rises, you're going to deny me. And then sure enough, as soon as Peter denies him a 3rd time, the cock crows, the morning has come. And then I can only imagine, it's described in one of the other gospels, but I can imagine Jesus being led out and seeing Peter. And Peter recognized us. And the most disheartening thing about this, Peter is not mentioned as being at the crucifixion. This is the last time Peter ever sees Jesus in his human form. And to have the last time you saw him be after you denied him, I can't imagine what that felt like. Peter has one of my favorite turns in the Bible. He goes from someone who's constantly ready to say he'll do something, but then not following through with it. He seems kind of skittish for a lot of his story. But then after Christ's resurrection, he becomes the head of the church. He becomes the forerunner of it. And it's another example of Christ making someone who has, human downfalls into the best possible version of themselves, into the head of the church. When right before Jesus goes to heaven, one of the last things he does is look at Peter and say, "On this rock I will build my church." Like, not anyone else, you're the guy I want to do it. And to see Peter follow through on that is a beautiful picture. But here at this time, Peter's in a pretty low place for having denied Christ. So the way would you like, I've been talking a lot, do you want to explain how the politics worked between the Romans and the Jews at this time before I talk about Pilate?
Yeah, sure. So that's what I was kind of getting into at the beginning of the show, is the situation in Roman Judea is that at the time that Jesus was actually born, King Herod was king of Judea. He led the state. It was technically part of Rome. It was an autonomous province that had its own leadership. And all that really meant was they paid taxes to Rome, and they wouldn't raise armies against them. They wouldn't march against Rome. They wouldn't fight Rome. After Herod gets a little too big for his britches during the early period of Jesus' life, what with the murdering all of the babies and all that, the Romans come in, and after Herod's reign, they say, yeah, we're not doing this anymore. We're putting our own governor in. We're going to be in charge. We're the law. You guys can still bring things to us, and you can tell us people are guilty, and maybe we'll prosecute them. But we are the law now. So Jewish law and Roman law worked side by side. The Pharisees and the Sadducees, as leadership of the Jewish people, worked side by side with the Romans, but the Romans still had the final say in matters of law. That meant that the Jews had to basically present their case, which is what they did, and it was brought to Pilate, because Pilate had to be the one to order the crucifixion. Crucifixion, by the way, is not a Jewish method of execution. It's Roman. The fact that it was done by crucifixion tells us that the Romans were in charge, whether the book does or not. The book could say that it was entirely the Pharisees that did all of this. They could tell us the Pharisees put Christ on the cross themselves, and the book in that case would be in contradiction with history. We know that crucifixion was a Roman punishment. So if somebody goes to you and they say it was the Romans had no involvement, the Romans had involvement. They were the ones who passed down the sentence, but they did it at the recommendation of the Sanhedrin.
Could you also explain what exactly the Pharisees and did you say the Sadducees were?
Yeah. So Pharisees were the priests. They were the priestly class of the Jews. Sadducees were the aristocracy of the Judeans. So yeah, you're looking at the priestly side versus the secular side. Both sides were not huge fans of Jesus, but the Sadducees were more about the impact he could have on their position as aristocrats.
Neither one liked him effectively. No. They were what it leads into, and Jesus talked about this a lot, was self-righteousness. The reason they denied Christ is because they wanted to maintain their power, their seat of it. Because part of Christ coming to earth is that the church is no more. The body of the offices of the high priest and the priest and all that stuff is done away with. He is the final high priest, as he said.
Yes.
So they didn't want to lose that. So therefore, this guy's a heretic. So anyway, Jesus is brought before Pilate, and Pilate effectively, he's in a weird position here because Pilate's job is to be the judge, so to speak, or the overseer for whatever the Jews want to do. The Pharisees can't put someone to death and then just go kill him. Mm-hmm. They have to take him to Pilate. Pilate has to do a trial, and then the Romans kill him on behalf of the Pharisees. Effectively, the Romans are the gun by which the execution is carried out. So Pilate, who doesn't care for the Pharisees or their beliefs or anything like that, is just walked into a guy who they're like, this guy says he's God, he's not. Kill him. and Pilate isn't super happy with that. So it says, then they led Jesus from Caiaphas, he was the first person that Jesus talked to, the high priest, unto the hall of judgment, and it was early, and they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. Because it was the Passover, the Pharisees had rules about what they were supposed to do, cleanliness during that time and stuff. Mm-hmm. So they don't actually follow Jesus into the hall with Pilate. They just push him in there. It says, Pilate then went out unto them and said, what accusation bring ye against this man? Basically, I hear you out. What's the crime? It says, they answered and said unto him, if he were not a malefactor, we would not have delivered him up to thee. Basically, a heretic.
Yeah.
Then said Pilate unto them, Take ye him and judge him according to your law. The Jews therefore said unto him, It is not lawful for us to put any man to death. So basically, they're like, this guy's a heretic, and he's like, what are you bothering me for? That's your trial. Go deal with it.
Yep.
And then they're like, yeah, but we can't execute someone. And he's like, execute?
Yep.
What? Like,
Because to the Romans, I mean, the idea of executing somebody for heresy is so far from their minds. If you bring them a different, if you came to the Romans and you were like, I have a different god, they were like, okay, cool. Can he be ours too?
Yeah, pretty
Can
much.
we have your god?
Like,
we'll pay. We'll buy him.
At most, it's like a fine.
Yeah, it's like
that kind of thing.
Literally, they'd be like, well, we're not fans of the fact that you don't respect our gods, but as long as you sacrifice to them, we'll be chill. Which, this is, by the way, how the Byzantine Empire ends up losing the entirety of the Middle East, is that they're just like, well, if you say you're our vassal, then we'll let you do your own thing. And the Muslims took full advantage. That's how we lost. That's how we lost the Holy Land.
Yep, they do in fact be like that.
They do be like that.
So basically, at first Pilate's like, this is like a private matter. Why do you need the Romans? And it's because the Jews can't execute someone while they're under Roman control. So it says that the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spake, signifying what death he should die. Again, saying that it's been prophesied that Christ would die, and Christ is aware of this. It says, then Pilate entered into the judgment hall again and called Jesus. Okay, so a bit of context for this. Pilate never heard of Jesus before, maybe heard a whisper or two of him, but doesn't care about him. Hears that this is a heresy condemnation so bad they want to kill him. So Pilate wants to meet the guy who has got such a fuss built about him. So he steps forward to him, and Pilate says, Art thou the king of the Jews? Because that's what the accusation the Jews have thrown at him is, that this man claims to be our king. He claims to be our God.
That was what the Romans were going to care about. Is this guy claiming that he's the king of Judea?
Yeah. The Romans also care if it's someone else claiming ownership over the people of Judea, because they claim ownership over the people of Judea. And if it's an uprising, then they care. Yeah.
That's kind of the important thing to look at too, because the Pharisees knew that they could not simply go to the Romans and say, well, this guy says he's God, and have the Romans kill him. They knew that it had to be, this guy's threatening your power in this region. Yeah. So they had to make it a secular issue.
Exactly. Yeah. So he walks to Jesus and said, Art thou the king of the Jews? Jesus answered him, Sayest thou that this thing of thyself, or did others tell it to thee of me? Basically, like, is this you saying this, or is this what, people have said on my behalf? Pilate answered, Am I a Jew? Thine own nation and the chief priest have delivered thee unto me. What hast thou done? Jesus answered, My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from hence. Pilate therefore said unto him, Art thou a king then? Jesus answered, Thou sayest that I am a king. To this end was I born, and for this cause came I into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth. Everyone that is of the truth heareth my voice. Pilate saith unto him, What is truth? And when he had said this, he went out again unto the Jews and saith unto them, I find in him no fault at all. So he goes to him and asks, Are you a king? And Jesus says, My kingship is not of this world. It's nothing to do with politics or the time of this. My kingdom's of something greater. I'm simply here to bear truth. So Pilate interrogates him and effectively sees nothing wrong. So he steps out to the Pharisees and says, I find in him no fault at all, much less wanting him to be executed. It says, But ye have a custom that I should release unto you one at the Passover. There was a tradition in just as during the time of Moses and the Passover in Egypt, there was a Passover tradition among the Jewish people, that one person who was set to be murdered would be spared, just as in the time of Moses, all of the firstborn sons that were to be killed were passed over by the death angel. So it's a sign of reverence to that. So Pilate says, Ye have a custom that I should release one at the Passover. Will ye therefore that I release unto you the king of the Jews? Saying that why not that this man who I find innocent to be yours? It says, then cried they all again, saying, not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a robber. And I believe in another account, I feel like they mentioned he killed someone. I can't remember. That may just be me filling in the blanks in my mind. At the very least, Barabbas was a known thief, right?
Yeah.
And they're saying, no, not Jesus, but release Barabbas. He's some other guy you have locked up. And that way Jesus can't fill in the, the peace offering slot, right? Because we want that guy dead. So Pilate therefore took Jesus and scourged him. Pilate sees it as, okay, if these guys are just really mad, maybe if we like beat him a little bit, which was pretty common in Roman government, then the people will get up. So they have Jesus taken to an arena of sorts, and he is whipped with a cat of nine tails, which is a whip that is full of spikes and hooks and whatnot, and it tears the flesh out of you with every rip. It actually says in the Bible that Jesus was whipped so ferociously that his bones were visible to all those who looked at him.
It's a brutal torture method.
A very brutal torture method. After that, a group of men come to him to mock him, and they take thorn reeds from thistles, like the nasty. You've probably seen plants with thorns like that long on them, the solid ones. They take those and weave it into a crown and set it on his head to mock him. Basically say, oh, you think you're a king, here's you a crown. And the crown itself stabs into him and hurts him. And says, after they did this, they said unto him, hail the king of the Jews. Again, making jokes on his behalf. And they smote him with their hands. Pilate therefore went forth again and saith unto them, behold, I bring him forth to you that ye may know that I find no fault in him. Basically like, all right, he's been punished enough. What say ye now? Then came Jesus forth wearing the crown of thorns and a purple robe. And Pilate saith unto them, behold the man. That I can only imagine what this looked like, man. God put on trial for people and like in a mockery dressed. And
it's important to
Pilate,
note also that
behold the man.
Yeah, it's also important to note that purple was the royal color.
It was a sign of royalty to wear purple.
Yep.
Yeah. Which again, they were doing it as another form of mockery.
Yeah.
But it is fitting that he would stand there in purple. Yeah, man. I'm trying to think if there's anything. I don't think there's anything in Luke that I want to mention. There's a longer conversation with Pilate somewhere else. I forget where. I think it's Matthew. But again, we're trying to stay on the Easter side of it. It's not that necessary.
That's the thing. This is all part of the Easter story.
Yeah. There's another conversation with Pilate where Pilate and Jesus talk longer. But I mean, you get the gist of it. Anyway, so after that, it says that when the chief priests, therefore, and the officers saw him, they cried out, saying, crucify him, crucify him. Pilate said unto them, take ye him and crucify him, for I find no fault in him at all. The Jews answered him, we have a law, and by our law he ought to die because he made himself the Son of God. Again, the crime for heresy was a pretty big deal within the Jewish belief. He ought to die. Then Pilate therefore heard that saying, he was the more afraid. And went again into the judgment hall and said unto Jesus, whence art thou? Jesus gave him no answer. So after beating him this much, they all say, we need to kill him, we need to kill him. So Pilate goes back into the hall. It's just him and Jesus. And he says, whence art thou? Basically, who are you? What have you done to make these people so mad? It says, then saith Pilate unto him, speakest thou not unto me? Knowest thou not that I have the power to crucify thee and have power to release thee? It's, gosh, I can imagine what this looked like. The Pilate, the governor before him, and he's talking to God, but God as a man. And he's saying, why aren't you talking to me? Don't you know I'm the only person in your corner right now. I'm the only one who can save you, and you're not going to talk to me? Jesus answered, thou couldst have no power at all against me, except it were given thee from above. Therefore, he that delivered me unto thee hath the greater sin. He's talking about like you're basically just a piece in this puzzle, and whoever delivered me to you hath the greater sin. Talking about the Pharisees, Judas, what have you.
You can tell that Pilate's struggling with the concept of killing an innocent man. Like
He is, yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's
There's
bothering
this
him.
battle going on with him. Like he won't just do what they say. He's like, coming to Jesus. Who are you? What? Like, there's got to be something. Tell me what you've done to make these people so mad.
He wants to save Jesus.
Yeah. In verse 12, it says, and from thenceforth, Pilate sought to release him.
Mhm.
Like since this happened, he sees like because Jesus is there forgiving him basically. He's saying that you're a part of this, but he that delivered me to thee hath the greater sin. He's kind of like telling him to not think too hard on himself for it. So from them, Pilate sets out to release him. But the Jews cried out, saying, if thou let this man go, thou art not Caesar's friend. Whosoever maketh himself a king speaketh against Caesar. See, there's where they flip the tables on. They're like, oh, yeah, well, this guy says he's a king. That doesn't just threaten our rule, that threatens yours. Because if you're Caesar's guy and this guy says he's king, that goes against Caesar. So I guess you're really not a friend of Caesar, are you? And now they're threatening Pilate's political career. It says, when Pilate therefore heard that saying, he brought Jesus forth and sat down in the judgment seat in a place that is called the pavement, but in Hebrew, Gabbatha. And it was the preparation of the Passover. And about the 6th hour, he saith unto the Jews, behold your king. Which, oh man, just the thought again, what that looks like, man. Behold your king. But they cried out, away with him, crucify him. Pilate saith unto him, shall I crucify your king? The chief priest answered, we have no king but Caesar. Now, that phrase is interesting for a lot of reasons. Throughout the Old Testament, we have time and time again that the Pharisees would renounce the rulership of the ungodly around them. That when they were under the control of the Philistines or when they were under the control of invaders, they would always say that your king is not our king. God is our king. God has always been our king. And then in this moment, to hear the Pharisees say, our king is Caesar. Not God, not anything called, even if they don't believe Jesus to be the Son of God, they're not even saying God is their king. They're saying the government's their king because that's what they want. That's what they can manipulate. It shows how far the crest has fallen. Then delivered he him, therefore, unto them to be crucified, and they took Jesus and led him away. In other accounts of the Bible, when he does that, it says that he washes his hands in front of the people to say, this is not on my hands. I release him to you. What you do is up to you. But effectively giving them the blessing to crucify him. So from there, it says, there's several different accounts of this that we could go with. I'm going to stick with the one in John just to make it more streamlined. Says, and he bearing his cross, because Jesus had to carry his own cross up the mountain to his execution. So Christ, with his bleeding from his exposed bones, with thorns pressed into his head, wearing a purple robe in mockery, is now carrying the cross that he's going to die on. It says he's carrying it forth to a place known as the place of a skull, which is called in Hebrew Golgotha, where they crucified him and 2 other with him. Actually, John cuts to the chase pretty quick. I want to I want to savor this moment a bit more for the brutality that it has. Here we go. Yeah. So Luke, it says, and as they led him away, they laid hold upon one Simon, a Cyrenian, coming out of the country, and on him they laid the cross that he might bear it after Jesus. So basically, there's a guy in the crowd watching this named Simon of Cyrene. And the Roman soldiers say, eventually Jesus collapses. He can't carry it anymore. So they point to Simon and say, you help this man carry that cross. So Simon of Cyrene helps carry the cross of Jesus up the mountain. Just the idea of that one man carrying the Lord's execution for him. Just, man. Anyway. And there followed him a great company of people and of women, which also bewailed and lamented him. But Jesus, turning unto them, said, daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but weep for yourselves, for your children. For behold, the days are coming in that which they shall say, blessed are the barren and the wombs that never bear and the paps which never gave suck. He's talking about that once they fully turn their back away from God, the hand of protection will be over. Bad things are coming, effectively. So he continues on that for a bit, speaks to them. It says, and when they were come to the place which is called Calvary, there they crucified him, and the malefactors, one on the right hand and the other on the left. Then said Jesus, man, this is probably, I keep saying like this may be the saddest part of the Bible. This may be the most uplifting. That this I truly think is one of the most powerful depictions in the entire Bible. Christ has been mocked, he has been spit on, he's been accused, he has been bled out, and now he is up there naked in front of people being mocked like a dog. It says in other gospels that the soldiers beneath him are taking his purple robe and they're throwing dice for it. They're casting lots. They're taking bets to see what of his stuff they can take home with them. And there's people mocking, cheering his death. And it says that Christ looks to heaven and says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Just, if there was ever a picture of what Christ-like means, of what forgiveness actually is, it's that. To be God and to look at these people who are doing this to you and says, "Forgive them, they know not what they do." Man, like anytime I've ever had an issue with anyone in my life, it is not the inkling of an iota to what Christ must have been experiencing at that moment. And if he asked for forgiveness, then who am I to look at anything other than that? Like throughout Christ's life, he continues to give examples for us in the modern age, right? Like being Christ-like means something. And even here on his deathbed, he is still leading by example. He is still forgiveness, he is still love, and he continues to show that with the rest of what happens while he's on the cross. After he says that, he says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." It says, "Then the people stood beholding, and the rulers also with them derided him, saying, 'He saved others, let him save himself, if he be Christ, the chosen of God.' And the soldiers also mocked him, coming to him and offering him vinegar, and saying, 'If thou be the king of the Jews, save thyself.'" Basically, if you're so powerful, if you're so great, how are we able to kill you with a cross, right? Just step off of it. Christ knows really what this moment means, the thing that the others around them aren't realizing, or at least the non-believers aren't realizing. So after that, slipping back to John for a second, because I really like this touch. So all the books of the Bible mention that, sorry, all the Gospels of the Bible mention that when Jesus was crucified, there was a sign placed above his head that said, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." So we all see that as another mockery, right? Again, outside of the account I'm going to mention. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, that seems to be a mockery. They put thorns in the shape of a crowd to make fun of him. They gave him a purple robe while he was otherwise naked to make fun of him, right? And now they put a sign over an execution post that says "King," right? Seems like another way to make fun of him, until you read John's account. In John's account, it says, "And Pilate," not someone making fun of him, Pilate wrote a title and put it on the cross, and the writing was, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." This title then read many of the Jews, for the place where Jesus was crucified was nigh to the city, and it was written in Hebrew and Greek and Latin. All the languages of the time, he wrote it on the sign and threw it above Christ. It says, "Then said the chief priest of the Jews to Pilate, Write not the King of the Jews, but that he said, I am the King of the Jews. And Pilate answered, What I have written, I have written." You read the other accounts of the gospel, it seems to just be another mockery. But the idea that whatever that conversation was that they had, it clicked in Pilate's mind that this guy is who he says he is. And he puts it in all the languages for all the people to read. And when the Pharisees ask him, "Why are you not putting it like, no, don't put King of the Jews, put he thinks he's the King of the Jews." And Pilate says, "What I have written, I have written." Again, it's just such a beautiful picture of this, the like God in his final moments, the signs of reverence that are still there, the things they can't stop out. Anyway, I'm getting hyped about this, but if I'm not a Christian, then what's the point, right? So it says, "Then the soldiers, when they had crucified Jesus, took his garments and made 4 parts, to every soldier a part, and also his coat. Now the coat was without seam, woven from the top throughout. They said therefore among themselves, Let us not rend it, but cast lots for it." And that's when they, like I said, cast lots. You could think shoot dice for the belongings of Jesus. Now this is one of the most, again, I keep talking about beautiful moments in the Bible, touching moments in the Bible, but man, this eats me up. Like how I said earlier, Christ with every aspect of his life gave us these moments, or like he gave us things to live by. He led by example, right? And I think about this. He's dying, he's bleeding up there. And in John 19, verse 25, it says, "Now there stood by the cross of Jesus his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Cleophas, and Mary Magdalene." So the three Marys of the Bible all stated together. It says, "And when Jesus therefore saw his mother and the disciple standing by, he says the disciple standing by whom he loved," again, we believe this to be John. So he sees Mary and John standing next to each other. It says, "He saith unto his mother, Woman, behold thy son. Then he said to the disciple, Behold thy mother. And from that hour, the disciple took her unto his own home." Man, the idea of him dying up there in his final moments, and he still takes care of his mom.
Mhm.
It's
So
man,
it's not necessarily all that relevant to the Easter aspect of things, but I am curious as to your thoughts on why John, because Jesus had his brothers, and in the Jewish tradition, usually he would give the care of his mother to the next eldest brother. So, what do you think about this? Do you think he's breaking tradition? Do you think that it's because he sees John as a brother? I'm just curious if you have a thought.
I think I have a few theories on it. I think there's a lot of reasons. For one, it's initially said that Jesus's family mocked him or his brothers and sisters mocked him at a young age.
Yeah.
And then they're not really mentioned through most of the gospel. So it can be assumed they kind of left him. Another reason that it seems that Joseph isn't here, the father of Jesus, is because according to some historical records, Joseph was arrested at this time for being a part of the church.
It's also possible Joseph may have been. I think it's possible he was dead.
I've also heard some stuff saying Mary is dead. He's not mentioned in like the record after this. So the biblical record, I mean. So he could have been dead, could have been in prison to where it was just Mary. And if we are at the situation where Jesus is on the cross and his siblings aren't there, it's probably because they don't want to be there. They don't want to be associated with Christ. They don't want to be associated with his image because this guy's getting arrested and right now executed for his stuff. So they don't want to be seen as a disciple of him, especially considering this is the same brothers and sisters that mocked him at a young age. As a matter of fact, there's a verse in the Bible that gets taken out of context all the time where, while speaking about his brothers mocking him, he says to love Christ is to hate your family. And he says this in the middle of like a teaching about a ton of stuff. The entire Bible is full with images time and time again of loving your family. I mean, look at this image right here of Christ about to die. And he tells John, the man he's closest to, take care of mom. This is some people like try to pull that like, oh, what do you think when Jesus said you should hate your family? Like, clearly that's not what he was saying. He's saying if your family pulls you away from what's right, what is of God, then you've got to separate yourself from that to do what is right. Sometimes you have to walk alone. Again, Christ didn't hate his family. His example here, his deathbed, is evidence of that. And also, Christ is the one who said there is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. So I think it's several factors. I think it's Christ recognizing that family will not always be there. The saying that people say all the time, blood is thicker than water, implying that family's closer than friends, is actually a short reversed version of the true saying. The full saying is the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, saying that people that you make promises and bonds with can often be closer than family. I think Christ was teaching towards that. And I think in that moment, John was more John was more his brother than anyone else. So he knows John's going to take care of Mary. Mary will take care of John. He sends them together. And then from there, it says that same hour, John takes Mary away from the cross so that she doesn't have to watch her son die. Yeah. So that's basically it. I think his family rejected him. I think that his family never really had anything to do with the ministry. And I think that John was closer to Christ than his own family was. So
that seems to be the case.
I think it's an interesting parallel to the secular idea today of like, when you're surrounded by whether it's family or friends that you've grown up with, quote unquote, toxic people, it's like the whole mentality of, oh, you need to find a way to separate yourself from them in order to be your best self in some form. It's interesting to see how that's not in any way, shape, or form a new concept. And not only is it not new, it's also a biblical concept.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I mean, Christ's brothers do redeem themselves eventually. They do come to belief in him, at least James and
Yeah.
Jude.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, there is that. I didn't want to give the impression that they were like deadbeats the whole time.
No,
They do
it's
eventually
also
turn around.
implied. It's also implied in the Bible he had several brothers and
Yeah,
family members, stuff like that. I'm not here to say that like James and Jude were belligerent or
I
anything
didn't
like
think you
that.
were. I
But
just want to make
yeah,
sure.
yeah. But the other ones mentioned, the other ones mentioned earlier in the Bible who he had to separate himself from. I think those are the ones he's referring to. And like
Yeah,
Christ said, there's a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. I think John was that. I think it's beautiful that in John's own writings, he normally takes himself out of the equation and just refers to himself as the beloved disciple,
hmm
only to then at the end say that it was him.
yeah,
That's a moniker that he kept. So yeah. I think, but short version, I think he did it because it was the best answer. That John be the one to look
yeah.
after her.
I agree.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then so I guess at this point, we get into sort of the end game of it, and Christ is he. How long exactly is he on the cross?
It's several hours.
Yeah, this is
So
not
the
a
way
quick
that
death.
yeah, the way crucifixion kills you is you suffocate. It's really not a fun death. So, all right, the way it works is you're hanging out there on a cross like this, right? And all your weight's pulled this way, and you're out there for days on end, right?
hmm
So, to breathe in this scenario, if you're fully this way, you can only take short, shallow breaths. So, the way you have to breathe is by pulling yourself up, right? If you're out there for several days, you can't do that forever. Eventually, you fall down and you pass out, die of exposure, what have you.
hmm
Um, however, the Jews have a um, law with the Passover that bodies cannot be left out during the Passover or during the final day of it. Like you can't leave people out overnight. So the Jews go to the Romans and say, "We, by our tradition, you can't do that. We need to kill them quicker." So the Romans go to the two other the thieves that are up there on the cross with Jesus and shatter their legs.
hmm
So that way they can't hold themselves up anymore, right? Speed up the death process. But it says when they get to Jesus, he's already dead, which is jumping the gun a little bit from where we're at.
hmm
That's which also fulfills a prophecy from the Old Testament, because in the Old Testament, Isaiah said that a bone of the Savior's would never be broken. So then about to break his leg and then realizing he's dead does that. But to rewind a little bit, while he's still on the cross after he says for John to take her home, um, it says that Jesus, with his last words, he says, "It is finished," and he bowed his head and gave up the ghost. The words, "It is finished," are
hmm
poetry to me. The entire Bible has been building up to this moment, from Adam and Eve in the garden, from Adam committing the sin, and God saying, "One day the Son of Man will come to bruise the serpent's head." All the way, thousands of years later, all the way to this moment of Christ on the cross saying the words, "It is finished." Everything that was said, the sin debt, all of it is done right now. It's over. It basically to all of the prophets, to all of the disciples, to everyone who had came before him, it meant something. We did
hmm
it. It's just, it is finished. What else is there to say? Um, it says, so the Jews therefore wanted on the Sabbath that no bodies would be up there, so they go to break their legs. His isn't broken, so instead, to make sure the reason Christ had already died is because unlike the two other guys who were on the cross, he had been whipped and was bleeding out and suffering anyway. That's why he died quicker. So to make sure he's dead, the Romans take a spear and stab him in the side. It says that blood and water poured out of the wound, which was again something else that was mentioned in the prophets, that the Son of Man would be stabbed and they would look on the wound, the people who did it, which again, everything that happens during the crucifixion fulfills the prophets. Not that the Roman soldiers are conscious of that. It's just that's how prophecy works. So anyway, um, after that, Jesus is killed. They don't break his leg. All of the scripture was fulfilled. So it says, and after this, Joseph of Arimathea, being a disciple of Jesus. So Joseph was, I don't think he's mentioned in the Bible up until this point, but from stuff that's said later, he was basically a disciple, one of the many followers of Jesus who was out there. It says that he was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly, for fear of the Jews, besought Pilate that he might take him away, that he might take away the body of Jesus and Pilate gave him leave. He came therefore and took the body of Jesus. And there came, okay, hold on. Before I get to that verse, that one kills me. So previous verse, we have Joseph of Arimathea, someone who has some money, as it's established, and he was a follower of Jesus, but he wasn't openly a follower because the Jews are looking to kill people who are followers of Jesus. So he goes to Pilate in secret, and lucky for Joseph, I mean, lucky, Christ had set all this up, of course, but lucky for Joseph, Pilate was favorable of Jesus. And if a Roman prisoner is executed, then they're just going to toss the body in with all the other Roman prisoners that are executed, right? Nothing special. So Joseph goes to Pilate and says, "Can I take his body?" And Pilate, having respect for Jesus, says, "Of course, take it away." It says, okay, so the question to you two, well, it's kind of cheating because Mattis knows where I'm going with this, but question to you, Thornberry, do you know of Nicodemus?
Not a clue, no.
All right, lovely. So earlier within John's own account, I think it's John chapter 3, actually, when the most famous verse in the entire Bible, "For God so loved the world, that he sent his only begotten son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish, have everlasting life." That's Jesus talking about himself there. The reason that whole conversation starts is because one of the Pharisees, who has been doing their research about it, right? He's been putting the pieces together of, let me think, Jesus Christ claims to be the Son of God, and he conveniently fills out every one of the criteria that the prophets had spoken of. See, but Nicodemus himself was a Pharisee. He was one of the high priests. So he's basically asking himself, do I believe in this Jesus guy enough that I'm willing to forego everything I've learned? That my entire class of people is wrong and this one guy's right. So one night he sneaks away from the Pharisees and meets with Jesus in secret. And in that conversation between the two, we have some of the most eye-opening parts of the entirety of Scripture. Because Nicodemus is not only a Pharisee, he's a really good Pharisee. He has been studying the Old Testament, the rule of the law, front to back, left to right. So he goes to Jesus and he drills him about it. He goes, okay, well, if you are the Son of God, then how does that explain the blood covenant that was mentioned by Moses and therefore carried out by Elijah and mentioned also here? Like, he knows his stuff. And he goes to Jesus, and Jesus satisfies every single one of his answers. And at the end of that, we have Nicodemus kind of slipping away, like asking himself the question, is this guy really the Son of God? And we don't get a single mention of him through the rest of the book of John until this moment, where it says, after Joseph takes the body of Christ, it says, and there came also Nicodemus, which at first came to Jesus by night, and brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100 pounds in weight. Yeah. We have a Pharisee who had been asking himself the question, is this man the Son of God? And after Christ is dead, we have that Pharisee tending to his body, making sure it's all in order. Like, oh, it's such a beautiful, like people too often want to make the Bible about yeses or nos, about the good, the bad, the wrong and right, when in reality it is humanity and also humanity. It is us against ourselves at every turn. And here we have the same class that crucified him. We have someone who wanted to ask the questions, and we have him now tending to the body of Christ. What that must have felt like to be Nicodemus, to think maybe this man was the Son of God.
I do also, what you just said is like almost perfectly encapsulated. And we all know John 3:16, but if you look at John 3:19, and this is the condemnation, that light has come into the world, and men loved darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. That it's basically this thing right here that's like, man is good, but man loves evil deeds. And so this, as you just said, that everybody wants to make it black and white, good and evil, light and dark, and it's, the whole thing is our free will. The fact that we're given, we are made in God's image. Something made in God's image must, by definition, be good. But we have the capability for evil. It is our mission in life to be the best we can, to work to be more Christ-like, to be a good person. Because it's not as simple as there are good people and bad people. It's just there are people who have the propensity to do either the good or the bad. and you have
Yeah,
to find the
yeah.
right way to do the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a kind of a question for both of you in the sense of it. We touched on it a little bit earlier, but especially with the Nicodemus story, this just kind of, and it's a little bit more historical as well. Is the reason that the majority of the other Pharisees did not believe that Christ was the Son of God purely from more of a secular and religious power standpoint?
It's complicated. I
Like,
mean,
what other reasons did they have?
in large part, it was that Jesus was doing and saying things that, on their face, did not seem like they were in line with the law.
Okay.
There were certain things like, eating things that were considered unclean, or not washing your hands at certain times that you were supposed to, that you were prescribed to. So there were a few things here and there, but then also they were watching the guy perform miracles. You got to remember also, though, that this is a group of people to whom certain miracles would not be necessarily impossible for a magician, so to speak, to do. Somebody who is working under the power of other gods, of other nations. So, in some ways, yes, it was a theological issue of, well, he's not the Son of God because of these things. In other ways, it was, he's not the Son of God because he can't be.
What's the he can't be bit?
Just he can't be, like, politically. Like, he's not. Them just not wanting to acknowledge it.
Not he can't be because like he physically can't be. He can't be because they don't want him to be, essentially.
Yes. Plus, like specifically coming from Nazarene, Jesus was born like lower class.
Yeah. They
and
expected
the
him to be.
They expected him to come as a king, the way they think a king should exist, not
Exactly.
of a child who was born in a barn because his mom didn't have anywhere to stay. He was a carpenter, right? They didn't see a carpenter as being their king. And then this guy shows up, and as he starts to talk about he keeps breaking the law. And when they ask why, he explains it's because they actually don't know the law as well as he does. They don't like that. And then he starts performing miracles. So surely this new guy who's performing all these magic spells isn't doing it from God if I'm as righteous as I am and I can't do it from God. So he has to be in the wrong.
Jealousy is a big part of it.
Jealousy, yeah, self-righteousness is where most of it comes down. Yeah.
Meanwhile, they're just looking at Jesus as essentially the first sovereign citizen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're expecting the heir of David. They're expecting David.
Exactly.
Which, of course, if you think about David, this makes complete sense that he was a low-born person who came out of nowhere and was suddenly, God's chosen. Because that's what David was.
Did Nicodemus have success in essentially persuading people of the reality of the situation?
I think, if I remember right, I think Nicodemus comes up later again in the book of Acts, where he's like after the resurrection of Christ, he's a full-blown Christian, like he's removed himself from the Pharisee class and everything. I think, but we don't really have a lot of coverage between their first conversation and Nicodemus now.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's
Yeah. So anyway,
we're trying to think about where we were in the story.
The Romans had just poked him.
Yeah, he's just been taken down from the cross.
Yeah, Nicodemus has taken him, or Joseph has taken his body, and Nicodemus has treated it. Yeah. And the way that's phrased, it's like, and there came also Nicodemus, which at first came to Jesus by night. It's so good. Anyway, then they took the body of Jesus and wound it in linen cloth with the spices, as the manner of the Jews is to bury. You bury them with spices because like embalming wasn't a thing and bodies smell really bad. So you bury them with strong smelling spices to cover up the smell. Now in the place where he was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden a new sepulchre, wherein was never man yet laid. There laid they Jesus, therefore, because of the Jews' preparation day, for the sepulchre was nigh at hand. So basically, the sepulchre, the way I've never been to Jerusalem, but I've been in a 1-for-1 recreation of the room. Basically, it was built into a hillside. If I recall right, it was to be Joseph of Arimathea's grave. So it's like in a garden in Jerusalem, and it's like a nice like brick thing built into the wall. So the way it is you step into a room that's maybe like not 4 feet. It's more like 6 by 4 feet wide or whatever. And there's like a sepulcher, a little like praying area, an area to mourn. And then on like one step up next to that, there is a little section just big enough to hold a body. So basically, the idea is the family, the friends could come take care of the body. They can mourn for them as the body is lying there wrapped in linen sheets or whatnot. It's basically the kind of grave a rich man like Joseph would have that he has now given to Jesus. So they lay Jesus in the sepulcher. It says, and then the first day of the week, and this is also a fun fact for Christians why we do our worship on Sunday, because it's the first day of the week. So on the first day of the week cometh Mary Magdalene early, when it was yet dark, unto the sepulchre, and seeth that the stone was wait, hold on. John jumps into the action a little bit. Let me go back to Luke.
We
need
yeah,
more build
okay,
up.
all right. I was gonna, okay, fine. I'll switch.
Now, upon the first day of the week, very early in the morning, they came unto the sepulchre, bringing the spices which they had prepared, and certain others with them. And they found, man, everyone is just jumping straight to the sound wasn't there. I want some hype. I want some bravado. I want to hear about the explosion.
It might be Matthew. It might be Matthew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me go back to Matthew. So after that,
Matthew gives it a little bit more meat. There's a little discussion between the Marys.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was looking for, the talk. So crucified, King of the Jews, blah blah blah. All right, so there's a lot more about the burial too. Is there anything I forgot to mention? Oh, I will mention one thing during the crucifixion. It says there's a satyr, and Matthew mentions that the moment Jesus died, there was a great earthquake. That an earthquake happened, the sky went dark, people began to freak out, and one of the centurions who had killed him looked at Jesus and said, "Surely this man was the Son of God." Which again was another prophecy of the scriptures that even the Gentiles, those who did not know, would know that this was God who had died. So anyway, it says that another detail is that the many women that were beholden afar off, which followed Jesus from Galilee, among them was Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James. It says that they went with Joseph and took his body down to take care of it. So the women who were there with him throughout his life were the ones who were with him to make sure his body was buried, taken care of, which again, picture love, grace, charity, blah, blah, blah. He laid it in the new tomb. It says, and there was Mary Magdalene and the other Mary sitting over against the sepulchre. Now, the next day that followed the day of the preparation, the chief priest and the Pharisees came together unto Pilate, saying, "Sir, we remember that the deceiver said, while he was yet alive, after 3 days I will rise again. Command therefore that the sepulchre be made sure until the third day, lest his disciples come by night and steal him away, and say unto the people, he is risen from the dead, so the last error shall be worse than the first." So basically, the Pharisees are thinking about this, and they're like, all right, we killed the guy. Mission accomplished there. But his whole thing, like his disciples have been saying for years, that after 3 days of his death, he'll rise again. So what's going to happen is you let him get carried away to a grave of people who follow him. So what are they going to do in 3 days? They're going to move the body and say he rose from the dead. So why don't you put a couple of centurions in front of the grave to make sure they don't try to steal it? So now this guy who's a heretic who they hate now has 2 armed guards in front of his grave so that no one can come steal the body. So it says, Pilate said unto them, "Ye have a watch, go your way, make it as sure as you can." So they went and made the sepulchre sure, sealing the stone and setting a watch. So they set 2 soldiers in front of the grave, and they put a giant stone in front of the grave as well to make sure that Jesus' followers can't come steal his body and then say that the guy was resurrected. It says, in the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn towards the first day of the week, came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see the sepulchre. And behold, there was a great earthquake. I imagine it like in my head, and you can't convince me otherwise. It was as the sun was rising on the first day of the week. The Sabbath is over, the deed has been done, and now with the sunrise, the sun rises. Behold, there is a great earthquake, for the angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat upon it. His countenance was like lightning, and his raiment white as snow. And for fear of him, the keepers did shake and became as dead men. They literally fell down on the ground as if they were dead. And the angel answered and said unto the women, Fear not ye, for I know that ye seek Jesus, which is crucified. He is not here, for he is risen. As he said, come see the place where the Lord lay. So I like the picture of this, it gets me every time. Christ had spent his entire life as the boy who was born in a manger, as a poor carpenter's son, and he was spit on, he was rejected, he looked as man, he had the countenance of man, and he went to his death covered in thorns and bleeding. And now that he's dead, now that the sin debt has been paid, now that all of humanity has the ability to once again return to God, our original point for creation, now that all that's been done, forget all of the humility. Poor boy, he is now cloaked in the raiment of his father. The lightning, the thunder, the angel, the raiment, all of it. He is now finally as he was intended, in the holiness of the Son of God. So it says, going back to John for a second, it says that they appear, Jesus is resurrected to appear. Yes. It says that when Mary Magdalene early, and it was yet dark under the sepulchre, and seeth the stone taken away from the sepulchre, that she runneth and cometh to Simon Peter and to the other disciple, whom Jesus loved, again John, and saith unto them, They have taken away the Lord out of the sepulchre, and we know not where they have laid him. Hold on. I think that actually comes right after. Let me finish the angel's conversation here. So the angel sitting on top of the stone says, Come see the place where the Lord lay. So it says, And go quickly and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead, and behold, he goeth before you into Galilee. There shall ye see him, lo, I have told you. And they departed quickly from the sepulchre with fear and great joy, and did run to bring his disciples word. And as they went to tell his disciples, behold, Jesus met them, saying, All hail. And they came and held him by the feet and worshipped him. Then said Jesus unto them, Be not afraid, go tell my brethren that go unto Galilee, and there shall they see me. So we see that Jesus reacts to that Jesus appears before them, basically, I'm alive, go tell the disciples what has happened. But John's account of it is
slightly different.
Okay, wait, hold on. Yes. So okay, so they go back to tell the disciples. I'm making sure I have my timeline right here. They go tell the disciples. John, earlier when I said there's something funny, John does. This is the part I was talking about. He says, Peter, so the ladies have now come back and said that Jesus, he's risen from the grave. Says, Peter therefore went forth, and that other disciple, again, we now know that this beloved disciple, this other disciple is John himself. He's not saying that here, but we can assume this is John. So John writing this says, Peter went forth, and that other disciple, and came to the sepulchre. So they ran both together, and the other disciple did outrun Peter and came first to the sepulchre.
He's literally like, we both got there, but I did get there slightly faster.
In the middle of the story of the resurrection, and this other disciple, who I'm not going to name until the very end, he was faster.
By the way, this is, in my opinion, one of the best arguments for the traditional authorship of John. That, like, this was in fact John writing it, is because why would the person who is pretending to be John write in these details?
Yeah. And I was faster than Peter. I know we're talking about, like, the sin debt paid and humanity's purpose, but I ran faster than Peter did.
I had the zoomies that day, man. It's the most elementary school thing I've ever seen, but I love it.
But he made sure that everyone was gonna know.
Yeah, that's exactly. It's the brag that transcended time.
Yeah.
He also makes fun of Peter in the next verse when he says, and he stooping down, talking about the unnamed disciple himself, and he stooping down and looking in, saw the linen clothes lying, yet went he not in. Then cometh Simon Peter following him, and went into the sepulchre and seeth the linen clothes lie. John's like, I was like peeking in, like, oh yeah, there's his clothes, he's risen, wow, that's crazy. And then Peter just blows by me, runs right into the room.
Exactly.
There's no credence or no understanding of what's going on, how big of a deal this is. It does crack me up. Now, I do like this a lot. Verse 7, it says, and the napkin, because, when you're dead, they lay the napkin across your face. And the napkin that was about his head not lined with the linen clothes, but wrapped together in a place by itself. Now, the symbol at the time in Jewish tradition was that, or Roman tradition, most traditions are at the time, I believe, is that how a ruler left a napkin determined how his councilship, the dinner, what have you, was going. If the ruler was to take a napkin and crumble it up and drop it, that's to say, meeting adjourned, we're done. Either dinner's over or the meeting's over, I want nothing more to do with you, what have you. But if he folds the napkin, that means he's coming back. That means that the job isn't done yet. So by Jesus resurrecting and then folding his napkin to the side is to say he's not done yet. His work is like his work with us is not through. So, which a lot of people tie into Revelation, stuff like that. We won't get into that. We're talking about Easter right now. Anyway, so it says, then went in also that other disciple, which came first to the sepulchre, which is John. He mentions once again, I came there first. I got there first. And he saw and believed. For as yet they knew not the scripture that he must rise again from the dead. Then the disciples went away again unto their own home. Now, this next part, I keep talking about all these beautiful parts in scripture, but really what we're reading is the last stage of everything the Bible's built up to this point. And we see so many truths fulfilled, so many beautiful moments fulfilled. And one of those is Mary Magdalene. So Mary Magdalene is mentioned as being one of Jesus's most committed disciples. She is the one who broke the alabaster box, if I recall correctly. There's a part earlier in the Bible. You know how I said it was like seen as a sign of respect to wash someone's feet?
Yeah.
Mary Magdalene took a box of alabaster, which is an insanely expensive spice at the time. We're talking, this would have been a family heirloom. This is not something that would be used, right? Like an alabaster box would be, or sorry, the box was alabaster. The spice within it was the something that would not be used. It was something that would be kept in family for generations. And when Jesus comes to her house, it says that Mary Magdalene breaks the box and uses her hair to wipe Jesus's feet with the spices. That is how much she revered the position that God had. And we don't really understand this for a lot of scripture until we read other accounts of Mary Magdalene. And it says in, I believe, the book of Matthew, that Jesus cast demons out of Mary Magdalene. That is how she came to be a disciple of him. There's some that believe, there's a story in the Bible where it says the Pharisees were about to stone a woman who they said had went out on her husband or something like that. She was an adulterer. The Pharisees were about to murder her. And it says Jesus writes something in the sand. We don't know what was written in the sand, but he writes something in the sand and says, let he who is without sin cast the first stone, and that the men go their own way. There's historical evidence that that was Mary, that she was about to be murdered. And then from the evidence we do have, she was possessed by demons and Christ threw them out. So when we hear stuff like that, yeah, I get why she washed his feet with her hair, why Christ meant so much to her, right? So then, after all that with the disciples, we have in the garden Mary now by herself next to the tomb. And it says, but Mary stood without at the sepulchre, weeping. And as she wept, she stooped down and looked into the sepulchre. And seeth two angels in white sitting, the one at the head and the other at the feet, where the body of Jesus had lain. And they said unto her, woman, why weepest thou? She saith unto them, because they've taken away my Lord, and I know not where they have laid him. That Mary thinks that someone's stolen his body, and she loved Jesus so much, she's mourning because she doesn't get to respect him. She brought more of her alabaster. She brought more of her spices to lay at his grave, and she's emotional because she can't honor him in his death, not realizing what's happened. She doesn't even realize she's talking to two angels. They're appearing as men. And it says, she says to them, I know not where they have laid. And when she had thus said, she turned herself back and saw Jesus standing and knew not that it was Jesus. Jesus was appearing in a robe, perhaps afar off. He didn't appear as himself. He was in his new heavenly body. I mean, the last time Mary saw him, he was emaciated, ripped to shreds. And now she's looking at the Son of God, unbridled.
He probably looked a lot more the way he's described in Revelation by John.
Yes. Yeah. This is no longer the lamb before the slaughter. That part's done. This is the Lion of Judah. This is the return. So he says he looks to her I knew not that it was Jesus. And Jesus saith unto her, Woman, why weepest thou? Whom seekest thou? She, supposing him to be the gardener, saith unto him, Sir, if thou hast borne him hence, tell me where thou hast laid him, and I will take him away. And Jesus saith unto her, Man, Jesus saith unto her, Mary. I can't imagine what that must have been like. Mary, there's a lot of people in the Bible who experience Christ in a way that the disciples, those who come afterwards, would talk about. Peter's one of them. Peter experienced doubt. He experienced, a lack of self-worth, and then Christ raised him up from that. And when we meet Mary, again, at the very least, she was possessed with demons. That's a pretty bad place to be in. Very much likely, according to historic record, she was about to be murdered for her actions under demonic possession, and Christ brought her out of all of that. And now, man, gets me
You're
going.
good. You're
now,
good.
Mary is standing in front of that same Christ, and at the mention of her name, she knows who it is. Because as soon as Christ says Mary, it says she turned herself and saith unto him, Rabboni, which is to say, Master. Whew, man, to imagine, okay, I'm good. Imagine being Mary Magdalene. Imagine being at that point where the person who saved you from everything you are is now in front of you. And everything that he said came true. Everything he said about you came true. And now in front of you, he is everything he promised he would be. And just at the mention of her name, she gets it. There's no question of, oh, I thought you were dead. Oh, I thought you were alive. At the moment he says her name, everything makes sense. The prophets were right. The covenant has been fulfilled. The Lamb of God is now the Lion of God. It all makes sense to her in the moment. What a blessed fulfillment Mary must have had. Yeah. One of my favorite moments from the entire Easter story. Because, like, man, the faithfulness of Mary fulfilled. It's such a beautiful picture. As is everything else really to do with this. So from there, it says that he speaks to her. And he says unto her, Touch me not, for I am not yet ascended to my Father, but go to my brethren and say unto them, I ascend unto my Father and your Father, and to my God and your God. Man, talking to Mary, my Father, my God, your God, because now he's right. Now the sin debt's been paid. Now there is no level of communication between God and man. You can go to God directly. You are saved through faith. The Holy Spirit dwells within you because of what I did 3 days ago. It's like, again, the prophets were right. Everything worked out. And man, to tell Mary, to my God and to your God. It says that Mary Magdalene came and told the disciples that she had seen the Lord, that he had spoken these things unto her. And then from there, we get Jesus's appearances. There's a time that he appears to a group of people on the road to it's not Arimathea, it's the road to
It's been a while.
it's in Luke. Hold on. Basically, there's two people who are walking on a road who are followers of God, but they weren't like the disciples.
Mm-hmm.
And they're talking about everything that's happened, and Jesus just appears before them, and they're like, "Oh, hi, stranger." Anyway, there's this guy named Emmaus, road to Emmaus.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, there was this guy named Jesus who was crucified, and we were really hoping he wouldn't die because we liked him. And Jesus is like, "Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that." And it says he goes and dines with them, and eventually, when they realize he is Jesus, he disappears from them. During the short amount of time Jesus is on earth, he appeared to over 500 people. Or, sorry, no, he appeared to a lot more people, and there are 500 different accounts given of Jesus appearing after his very official and legitimate crucifixion by the hands of the Romans. It's documented. So much so that the Caesar of Rome at the time, which was
Tiberius
mentions in one of his writings that there is a most wicked rumor among the Jews of this man called Jesus, who supposedly is now back from the dead. Like, that's how many accounts there were of his appearance to people throughout the region, that the Roman Caesar was like, okay, what's going on? What seems to be the issue? So Christ appears to a lot of people. He appears before the disciples. At first, the disciples think they're seeing a ghost, and he tells them to touch him because a ghost doesn't have flesh and blood, and he's now here in his new form. Thomas was not there when he first appeared, and whenever he comes back to the disciples and all the disciples say they saw him, Thomas tells him they're lying, that there's no way. So Jesus appears once again and tells Thomas, put your fingers through the holes in my hand, or touch your hand into the spear of my side to see that I am real. And Thomas doesn't need to, because standing in front of him, he recognizes. And then from there, Christ gives them his final messages. He sees them out fishing on the coast. He does the whole cast your nets off to the right side of the boat where they catch a lot of fish. Peter, realizing that it's Christ, throws himself off of the ship and swims back to shore. Because again, Peter hasn't seen Christ since he denied him. And to now see him on the shore, he swims back to him. And there's this beautiful picture during Peter and Jesus' final conversation where Jesus asked Peter, he says, Peter, do you love me? And Peter says, of course, Lord, yes, I love you. And Jesus says, then feed my sheep. Again, metaphor for, look after the people who come after me.
Yeah, he's telling him to be a pastor.
Again, he's telling him to be a pastor because he knows what he wants Peter to be. He wants Peter to be the rock of the church. He wants him to be everything. But last time we saw Peter had denied Christ. So Peter asks again, Peter, do you love me? Peter says, yes, Lord, I love you. Jesus says, feed my sheep. He once again asks a third time. After the third time, Peter says, of course, I love you. And Jesus said, 3 times you denied me, 3 times you are restored. It is him forgiving Peter for abandoning him. And Jesus' worst moment, he's forgiving him for that. And then afterwards, he says, on this rock, I'm going to build my church. He makes Peter whole, then tells him what he wants. He wants him to be the first Christian, the greatest, up there with Paul as the greatest Christian who ever lived, right? But before he does that, he takes care of him. He takes care of him on a personal condition. And then from that, Peter goes on to be the head of the church. He has the men follow him to a mountaintop. He gives a final sermon, which is recorded in the Gospels, and then he ascends to heaven to be with the Father. And with that, we have the end of the Gospels. We have the end of the Easter story. And from there, we launch into the story of the New Testament church that Peter founds effectively, of the missionaries that begin to go out, of people like Paul, of people like Timothy. And really, the New Testament church is us. We are the New Testament church. We are the people who follow after Christ, after the death, the burial, and the resurrection. So the reason the Easter story is so important is because it is everything. It's not only the entire Bible. As a Christian, it is the entire everything. From humanity's inception, our purpose was to be in companionship with God. And we decided to reject that, to have sin, to have our own free will. So God gave us a way back. And that way back was the Easter story. So the reason it's so important, the reason I get so emotional talking about it, and it tears me up so much, is because as a Christian, what else is there, right? What could be more important than God himself coming to earth and then dying for me? And not only in the sense that he does it as some grand gesture, as some gesture of a king, but he does it as a friend. He does it as a companion, because in the end, that's what we were always meant to be. And yeah, the Easter service is very important to me. And yeah, thank you everyone for letting me talk about it. I appreciate it.
I mean, I learned things.
Yeah, well, and I think, it was hard not to let you talk, because I don't think I've ever witnessed somebody be so genuinely passionate about that story, and I think that was really impactful, not only for me personally, but for everybody watching.
Yeah, I've never heard the story told with such passion.
Yeah.
So that's...
I appreciate that. Normally I'm like, oh, it's cringe, which it is, objectively. It's cringe for like YouTubers or stuff to get emotional and stuff. But this is the one exception, the one thing. Because again, like if I'm really about it, if I really believe that Christ is the Son of God and he died for me, then why would I be? What else matters, right? Like what's more important? My dignity? No. Looking cool on camera? No. But like unironically, if I'm real about it, then I better be real about it, right? Why take second place? Yeah. So that's the one thing that I won't apologize for. Now, if I was crying over, say, what's something stupid I've cried about on camera for? I've cried over like fictional books before. That's pretty cringe. That's pretty lame.
I don't know, man. Stuff can hit you hard. I mean, not as hard as that, I would imagine, but
When I was younger, I cried when Wilson floated away.
But that's totally valid.
That's a fair one.
Yeah.
I was like 7. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I cried. I
That's
cried
rough.
when Mufasa died. When I
Yeah.
was a kid. So
You want to know the one I have shed a tear at as an adult that I'm a little bit like, come on, man. get your stuff together. And it's God, I want to look up the quote really quick.
I've got emotional recently to people's dogs on TikTok. Like their dog will die and they'll make some like sad poem about him, and I'm like, and I mean, like, what am I doing? I'm a man. I was born to die in a war in Europe. Why am I sad?
Exactly.
Like, yeah.
The call's getting strong, isn't it? It hits in the mid
Yeah, it's here we go.
My biological clock is ticking.
So this is by a Catholic author, for the record, but it's all wrong. By rights, we shouldn't even be here, but we are. It's like in the great stories, the ones that really matter. Full of darkness and danger they were, and sometimes you didn't want to know the end, because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing, this shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new day will come, and when the sun shines, it will shine out the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you, that meant something, even when you were too small to understand why. But I think I do understand. I know now. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't, because they were holding on to something. That there's some good in this world, and it's worth fighting for. That's one of the ones that has made me cry. And the only reason I left a few words out of it is because Isaiah always gets mad at me when I reference Lord of the Rings. That is Samwise Gamgee. Yeah, that is Sam.
But when you start talking, like, this is from some like high fantasy series.
But I am serious. But I am serious when I like, because when you read Lord of the Rings, it's not a Christian story, but it's a story with a lot of Christianity. And that's
to like him and Lewis both did that a lot with their stuff. Yeah,
it's a little bit more. Tolkien's a little bit less in your face with the allegories, but it's, I think that's one of the things that made me shed a tear as a grown man. I was like, you know what, it is worth fighting for, and I think that is the key story of all of this stuff. Is humanity is worth fighting for, good is worth fighting for, and for the creator of all things, it was worth dying for.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah, that's the Easter story. I don't know if you boys wanted to add anything onto that.
No, that was better than I could have possibly done.
So, I don't think there's anything that could even remotely top you telling that story. So
I almost feel silly going into the part I had planned to do and just talking about how it's not pagan. Yeah, I got. Listen, we all.
Here. You can go find it.
All right.
I think mine's comically bigger. This is the biggest Bible I can find.
You are larger than me, and that does appear to be.
Insane.
That yours is bigger, I think.
Yeah. This would like stop like AP ammo. It's insane.
Those level 4 Bibles. But I will say, everybody. I have seen some questions in the chat, so I just wanted to pull it up. Everybody should have at least one of these.
Which is
it's a Bible. This is a King James.
Okay.
Yeah, I highly recommend the King James. Yeah, but everybody should have it. In my opinion, every English language Christian should have a King James, because it's not the best study Bible in my opinion, but it is one of the most beautiful in terms of language. So and that's important. Yes, it's important to have your study Bible, and for that I keep a regular study Bible. I also keep this. It's an interlinear. It's got Greek, Hebrew, and English side by side. So you can look at what the original words were that were used in the original writing. So that's very important to have. I would say also, the reason to have a King James is that the study Bible's great for understanding the facts of what's in the book, what it says, what it means. The King James makes you feel in a way that this doesn't, in my opinion.
It's more poetic writing almost.
It is poetry. The goal of the King James was basically keep it as poetic as possible while remaining true to the wording. So it's a literal translation, but it is written as poetry in a lot of ways. And then I would say the last thing, Strong's Concordance. This is a Bible dictionary. It tells you what every single word in the Bible means. They are all cataloged. I'm pretty sure the guy went insane making it. I'm not kidding about that.
Wait. Does that include anything that's in Revelation as well?
Yeah.
Really? Well, that's probably where he went insane.
Well, so it's just a dictionary. It just tells you what every single word used in the book means. Yeah. So it's not going to tell you like what the symbolism necessarily is.
Fair.
But that's more complicated. But I just wanted to take a moment to say, because I just saw people in the chat the whole time, and I was like, I want to answer this, but Isaiah's doing such a good job.
Do you want me to run through the super chats so you can?
Yeah, let's run
Yeah,
through
sure.
the I need to pee so bad, so I'm gonna go do
Your
that real
thing.
quick. I'll be right back.
You're good. You're good.
This
Once
is
it's
getting
down,
stuck
it
on
should be
something.
fine.
Yeah, there we go.
I'm also turning off my mic for chat. No freebies.
All right.
Incredible.
Sounds good. While he's gone, I mean, we'll get to a few of these super chats, but I want to talk about the paganism stuff.
Yeah, fire it up.
No, I want to wait for Isaiah.
Oh, okay.
He's got to pee.
We could talk about how fantastic of a job he did.
That was
while he's not here,
so good.
so that way he doesn't hear us complimenting him.
Yeah,
that's cringe.
Yeah, that's cringe. Also, I'm gonna take these off for a minute because they hurt my
Yeah, they do
ears,
hurt,
dude.
yeah.
We gotta get nicer ones.
I know. Well, we should get.
Weren't
the
these
3,
like
4,
$100
5s. Yeah,
each?
yeah. I'm gonna do the same thing.
Do we just have really like big ears? I don't know, man. But yeah,
I
that
do.
Ooh.
Yeah, that was a phenomenal telling of that. It's been a while since I've been in a church, but I'll tell you what, that was definitely better than any sermon I've heard.
Yeah, that was incredible. And there's God, just the depth of his knowledge on these things is insane to me.
Yeah, it's really impressive.
Because I'm sitting here and I know the story pretty well.
Yeah,
I know the story better than most.
yeah.
And I'm just sitting here like, oh my gosh, he is making connections I would not have thought of.
That's the thing. I love that he can go through. Oh wait, we got.
Oh, he's back. We gotta stop being
yeah,
nice
yeah,
to him.
yeah.
We were insulting you.
Oh, he can't hear us
Oh, he
yet.
can't hear us
It's
yet?
almost there.
Okay, then he doesn't know.
Yeah,
he doesn't know. We were being mean
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
to you.
Uh,
Chat,
yeah.
don't tell him
Saying
what horrible
horrible
things
things.
we were saying.
Chat,
Yeah.
play along. Yeah, but before we get into super chats, I just really quickly, because it doesn't take much time to address this. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. This weekend, you will see many a person say Easter is originally pagan. You will see two main arguments for it. They will be Easter comes from the goddess Ishtar, a Mesopotamian fertility goddess, whose symbols were the rabbit and eggs. This is wrong. You must understand this is wrong, and you must be equipped properly, because there are two options you have. One is to not engage and say that's nice and walk away. That's the option you should probably take. If you're like me and incapable of doing that, here's what you need to know. Ishtar and Easter are not etymologically related. The two words have nothing to do with one another, and the goddess Ishtar did not have rabbits and eggs as symbols. There is also no known existence of an Easter egg hunt occurring with the worship of Ishtar. There was no Ishtar egg hunt. Part of the reason that it's a little silly, the Ishtar one, because it's a very obvious word association. Ishtar and Easter sound similar. Two things are from the same general region, and we know that the Jews spent a good amount of time in Babylon. That one's a little on the silly side. It's very simple. Ask them if they can provide you a single source claiming that Ishtar is actually connected. They will not be able to find a single academic source to do it. The other option is to go further. Easter is actually a Germanic term. It comes from estre, and that comes from the same root as ost, or east. So, Easter, Ost, it's definitely to do with the rising sun, the dawn, and all we know is that according to the Venerable Bede in his The Reckoning of Time, I want to say 8th century work, he says that his ancestors, the Saxons, used to call the Paschal month, the time of Easter, after a goddess called Estre, and that they used to have festivities and ceremonies in devotion to this goddess, but eventually they became Christian, took it over, and now it's the Paschal month and all of that. When he was writing this, there were no Easter egg hunts. When he was writing this, there were no Easter bunnies. He also doesn't explain anything beyond, we used to have a festival in celebration of the goddess Esther. That's the sole attestation of a pagan Easter. There's nothing else. That's it. There is one other possible mention of Estre, and it comes from I think it's a Germanic statue that the Romans found. Or it might be a Roman statue in the Germanic tradition. I can't remember the exact details, but it's not clear that it's even the same deity, and we're not sure there was a deity. It might have just been their festival of the springtime, because it was around the vernal equinox. So it could very easily be that they didn't even have a goddess called Sora, or Estre, or any of those things, and that was just the name of the month. And he's very clear that it's now called the Paschal month, because they didn't call it Easter in the 8th century. They called it Pascha. Just like everybody else who called it Pascha Just like every other non-English speaking country still calls it Pascha or some variant of that.
Really?
Oh yeah, in Norway, Pascha. Greece, Pascha. Pascha. Yeah, Spain, Pascha. Yeah, it's Easter is just the English term.
Interesting.
It is Pascha or some variant everywhere else on Earth. There is absolutely no evidence that there was a pagan festival called Easter. They had Estra Monat, which was their Eastern month, is what that meant. Eastern month, not Easter month. So just wanted to go through those really quick. I know it's a little underwhelming after that extraordinarily emotional and passionate retelling of the story of Easter, but this weekend you'll hear it. Now you're equipped to fight it, because at the end of the day, there's absolutely no evidence for a pagan Easter tradition. It doesn't come out of paganism, much like Christmas. Both are their own thing. Both are originally Christian. And at the end of the day, if people really, really, really want to argue with you about it, just tell them, all right, buddy, and walk away. Because there's no sense getting into the weeds. It's, you are right. If they can't be convinced, they can't be convinced. I do it because it's important for other people to see somebody doing it, who don't know, who don't have a platform. You don't need to do that. But now you can if you wish. And now super chats.
Fair enough. Do we also want to say in these next few minutes here, we'll wrap up any new super chats that come in, because we have a lot.
We're killing the line now. We're probably going to run through these pretty fast, I think, at least comparatively. So any super chats from 8:38 p.m. Sorry,
9:38.
9:38 p.m. here on out, done. Don't count.
Yep.
So definitely from now on the shows, because it's getting to that point. Put your super chats in during the show. Put them in before we get to question time, because that has certainly happened on a few occasions.
I'm taking a picture of the last one here that just came in, so that
gotcha.
way we don't
sounds good.
Don't mess anything up. Odachi for $20. Thank you very much. Says, y'all saved my life. You don't know how good the work y'all do is. Praise God.
Thank you. That means a lot. Thank you.
That does mean a lot.
Wandering Madman for $2 says, Yahoo, first time watching live. God bless.
Thank you. Glad you're watching.
Crimson for $5 says, just wanted to say that I love you guys. You have quickly become one of my favorite creators on the platform. Keep up the quality. Keep the faith. God bless you.
Thank you.
Kenton Compton for $19.99 says, absolutely love what y'all do. Unfortunately, I can't watch live, but I know you hear this a lot. You've turned my faith around and you have brought me back to God. I've never felt so on fire for the gospel before. Thank you.
Thank you. That means a lot. It really does.
Thank you.
Super Nooper 12 for $9.99 says, love you guys and your videos. I wish I could stick around to see this one live, but keep up the good work and I cannot wait to watch this later. Jack Garcia for $1.99 says, we are so back.
We are back.
We are back.
We are so back.
We are back.
We are back.
Jack, we need some weird Bible shoes.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, that's a great idea. Walter Melon, interesting spelling, love that, for $2 says, back at it like crack addicts.
Oh no.
Not
the back at it like crack addicts.
Different vibe for this stream.
Yeah.
Cameron Miller for $1.99 says, the stream is starting soon, TM. Yep.
Listen, there were some problems.
That one's on me. I will again take responsibility for that one.
Aiden has exactly a week to figure out what's wrong with the camera and microphone setup before he is ritually sacrificed.
Yeah. Not like this, though. Daniel Todd for $5 says, can we have Wendigoon and Brandon Older Brother Warriors Poet Society on the podcast? I don't know what that means.
Brandon Herrera's older brother. Poet Society. Yeah.
I don't know
because he says I'm his little brother and he says John Lovell is his older brother.
Gotcha.
I see.
All right. As in this podcast or on one of Isaiah's podcasts? Since he now has 8
I think he means this podcast. John Lovell's a Christian. He's pretty open about it, so I imagine they mean this one.
If you want to invite him, feel free.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've talked to him before about Christianity. He's pretty cool. He's a funny guy. He's fun to talk to.
Nice.
Have you ever seen Warrior Poet Society?
I have not.
I grew up on his channel. He's a cool dude.
I'll take a look at it.
Nice. Eli for $9.99 says, love y'all boys. As a poli-sci major, I look at the broken world and I'm discouraged, but y'all remind me of the good people in the world. God bless, bros. Also, congrats, Isaiah, on getting married.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's official.
Cameron Miller for $1.99 says, yippee. Jace the Shepherd for Czar 35.
I'm looking it up.
Might as well. Says, hey, Mr. Goon, would you ever be interested in collaborating with Mike Jones' Inspiring Philosophy? Would you do it for the gourd?
I might do it for the gourd.
Do you
I
know?
know that name.
He
I
was
can't
on
remember.
he was on Lore Lodge about what, a month and a half ago?
Yeah, about a month and a half ago now.
Yeah, he was on about a month and a half ago if you want to take a look at that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, he's great.
Yeah, he's a cool dude.
I think you and him would have great conversations. He's very, very academic, like he's a biblical scholar. But he's also very good at talking, like,
Yeah,
have
I
a
think I've seen this
conversation.
guy before.
Yeah.
Pretty sure I've seen him in like TikTok clips. And
Yeah,
stuff.
exactly. He's good long form too, though.
Cool. Okay.
It's South African Rand.
Interesting. Andrew for $4.99 says, come back harder than my dad coming back with the milk. Question, what's your favorite theory on the lost years of Christ?
Theory on lost years. By that, I assume he means like the parts not accounted for in the gospel.
That's what I assume.
You would certainly know better than I would.
I'm pretty sure he's just referring to the fact that they're like all 33 years aren't explicitly laid out in the
Yeah.
gospels. So I mean, I think John sums it up best when at the end of the book of John he says, if hold on, it's literally the last verse in John.
It's
Second to last verse.
the years between the age of 12 and 30.
Yes, because the miracles that are mentioned are when he's 30. Luke, John. I think the solution for that, John pretty well sums up at the end of the book when he says, and there are also many other things which Jesus did, the which, if they should be written every one, I suppose that even the world itself could not contain the books that should be written. Amen.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty definitive in my mind. It's like all the stuff we talked about for the last 3 years of his life, there was like more of that and even more stuff within those years that we didn't even mention. So I suppose if it was written, the books would not contain, which is another further evidence of his love and admiration for Christ.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where the stuff that's important to the religion is in the book. Those 18 years, I mean, for several of them, he's just growing up. And then for a bunch of them, he's probably just working as a carpenter in Judea.
Yeah.
There's also the whole age of reason concept in the Bible, and the fact that there's an age at which point you are responsible for your spiritual life and your spiritual health. And before that, you're kind of in a grace period to some extent, but nobody's really, there's not an agreement on when that is.
Maybe they also had informal understanding of that whole like hit 25 and your frontal lobe develops and you suddenly like
That's what I would wonder.
need a 401k.
Yeah, that's what I would wonder. But it's also clear that, he probably was well read or well understood the scriptures himself. Probably both between him being God and him having an education.
Yeah, that'll help. Yeah, I wonder at what age, like I wonder if it trickled in or if there was a point like that where, like, because was he at 2 years old with the knowledge of himself as God and all of that, like, capability? Like, it had to have trickled in, right?
We can get into that in another episode. I think Jesus' childhood could be its own episode.
Yeah, no, I think that would be entertaining.
Yeah.
Moving on, Dakota Leach for $10 says, as a history nerd and Christian, this is my favorite. My kind of joke, kind of serious question is, if Bad Mustache Man repented in his final moments, would it be wrong to be upset seeing him in heaven? So essentially, if you saw him in heaven and got upset because he repented in his last moments, is that wrong of you?
Yes, there's actually a parable about that.
Mhm.
It is the story. Hold on. Hold on. It's on the tip of my tongue. I'm going to throw up.
Yeah, I'm curious what you're going to here because I'm
hold
racking my
on.
brain.
It is the parable of someone gets saved and someone else is mad about it.
Prodigal son?
I may actually hold on. I may actually be just thinking of Nineveh, of Jonah.
Are you thinking about Jonah?
I think that's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Oh,
When Jonah goes to Nineveh and the city is saved, and then he goes and sets up on a hill under the gourd, which we're very
Mhm.
familiar with.
Very
He goes
familiar
and
with the
sets
gourd.
under the gourd, excited to watch the destruction of the city, and it never comes,
Mhm.
and he gets upset about that.
And
Like
God's
that.
just like, well, they repented. They fixed.
What the solution to that is all of humanity is infinite potential for good or bad. It is sin that leads us to
Mhm.
bad. So any human, regardless of how evil, even funny mustache man, completely removed from the sin of humanity is as God originally intended, a a companion of Christ, right? So if if he was to be saved and then die and then go to heaven and have that's the sin of humanity completely ripped from him, it's a completely different unidentifiable creature from what it was before.
Yeah.
So I would say it being a different person, that I will also say that if you go to heaven and are upset, that's not happening. You're not upset in heaven because
Yeah.
the feelings of negativity, upsetness don't exist either. But yeah, it's like it's like yes, but asterisk. He is not the same person. You are also not the same person. Nothing is the same between this life and that one. Yeah, yeah.
In chat, they're saying it's the wages and the workers, but
Hold on.
That the rich man and the beggar, is that the same
No,
thing?
the rich man and Lazarus,
Yeah, it's different.
he's not upset over it. The rich man refuses to listen to what Lazarus has to say about Christ.
yeah. If they're talking, I'm curious because one person said the landowner.
Parable of the vineyard workers, Matthew 20, 1 through 16. Somebody just said.
Are they talking about the one where it's the owner goes away and the one guy buries the talents he was given to keep them safe, and the other guy risks them?
That's about not using the gifts that you're given. Matthew 26. What was the verse you said?
Matthew 20, 1 through 16.
21 through 16.
Luke 15.
Going for the kingdom of heaven is a man that.
Somebody else said Luke 15.
No,
that's what I'm looking for.
The Matthew one's about the people who were given
coins, right?
Wait, no, actually.
No. Luke 15, they said?
Yes.
Here, no. Okay, this is it. They're right. So basically, it's Jesus giving a story about a parable. He says, and there were a group of laborers who were given a penny a day for their work. It says, and he saw. Okay, hold on. Let me just. It's worth it. For the kingdom of heaven is likened to a man that is a householder, which went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. And when he had agreed with the laborers for a penny a day, he sent them out into his vineyard. And he went out about the third hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And he said unto them, Go ye also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right I will give you. And they went their way. Again, he went about the 6th and 9th hour and did likewise. And about the 11th hour he went out and found others standing idle, and saith unto them, Why stand ye here all day idle? They say unto him, Because no man hath hired us. He said unto them, Go ye also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right, that shall ye receive. So when evening was come, the Lord of the vineyard saith unto his steward, Call the laborers and give them their hire, beginning from the last unto the first. And when they came that were hired about the 11th hour, they received every man a penny. But when the first came, they supposed that they should have received more, and they likewise received every man a penny. And when they had received it, they murmured against the goodman of the house, saying, These last have wrought but 1 hour, and thou hast made them equal unto us, which have borne the burden and heat of the day. But he answered one of them and said, Friend, I do thee no wrong. Didst thou not agree with me for a penny? Take that thine is, and go thy way. I will give unto this last, even as unto thee. It is not lawful for me to do that. What I will with mine own. Is thine eye evil, because mine is good? So the last shall be first, and the first shall be last. For many be called, but few are chosen. So again, having the point of view of a Christian, because if we really believe this whole thing, if we really think that there are two classes of people in the world, those on their way to heaven and those on their way to hell, and if our idea of that is other people aren't as good as us to get into heaven, or maybe we deserve more in heaven because we were doing a better job at it than they were, we have the wrong idea entirely. If the only thing that makes humanity evil is the sin of man, And we're not doing everything in our power to pull people away from that. And as a matter of fact, we're judging them by their actions to see how we're better. Then we're no better than the Pharisees. So yeah, in short, like again, there's two classes of people. If evil mustache man or anyone else in the world truly had the reconciliation with Christ, then they've got a lot to pay for it. They have done a lot to take away from their works towards their holy works that would be put in heaven. But a soul is a soul, basically.
Yeah. It's I personally, you know, I am a believer in the idea that there is some form of purgatory where we are, you know, we do spend some time repenting in some form or another beyond just, hey, I'm sorry, I believe. So that's my perspective on it. Is I don't think that anybody at death goes directly to heaven or hell. Probably there are a few, but I would argue in my interpretation of the scripture, it seems to me like there is a period between death and judgment, or that there's a period between death and your final position in the afterlife. So I would have to say this much. God knows your heart. God knows why you repented. And if the only reason that are we really not allowed to say his name on here?
I was just doing it because it's funny.
Okay, yeah, I guess.
Yeah. It's just more entertaining.
Right, fine. The evil Charlie Chaplin. If he
see, that's more entertaining.
I guess, yeah. If evil Charlie Chaplin repented solely for fear of hell, that's different than repenting because you genuinely believe. It's hard to say. I mean, it's definitely one of the harder questions when it comes to faith and theology of how can you forgive evil? How can you accept the forgiveness of evil as well? And yeah, I mean, I don't think it would be, like Isaiah said, there's, not supposed to be feelings of negativity in heaven in the first place. But I think that if by some manner or measure you could feel negatively about seeing him, I don't think that would necessarily be wrong. But it would be, you would be displaying a poor understanding of the grand scheme. That the earthly life is just a passing period of our lives, our existence. So yeah, it's obviously, I don't think that's going to be an answer that satisfies most people, but
well, it does make me think of a question, and I know we're trying. Sorry, go ahead.
No, nothing. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I know we're going to try and get through this pretty quickly, but just in terms of, I want to make sure that this is a correct understanding, or if this is a bastardization of scripture or something from like Dante's Inferno that got trickled in. But is it their truth to even those within hell can save themselves if they were to truly repent? And the reason why people are there is because they refused the truth of God and Christ, and they repented and didn't truly mean it. Is that actual scripture, or is that
it's not biblical?
Okay.
That belief's propped up in some beliefs and stuff like that, but it's not from the Bible.
Okay.
Yeah, there's some argument looking within the scripture that there's essentially a holding period between now and the end.
Put it this way: if what we are as humans is a balance between the part of us that is God, that is of light and good, and the part of us that is man and evil, if we go to heaven, we entirely separate the good from the bad. So now there is no bad to pull us down anymore. If we do not go to heaven and we go to hell, we are entirely separating the God from ourselves, and now we are just the bad, or just the vile and the wickedness. That is what you give yourself into, one side or the other, either heaven or hell. So it is the full commitment to either God or the opponent. So
yeah. And there's some suggestions from Jewish scripture from the pre-Christian era that your sins are physically burned away, that you are purified through fire of your sins in the afterlife before you can join the congregation of God in the afterlife. So, and then there in Revelation, there's the fact that you're at the end of everything, God will cast Satan and his servants into eternity. And what that means, of course, is up for debate. But that to me suggests that whatever that final judgment is, it comes not now. That comes during the final showdown between good and evil. But obviously there's numerous interpretations of all of this.
Yeah, makes sense. Mitchell989 for Canadian $5 says, when I spread the good word about this podcast, I tell people about the story of David and the trial of many javelins, and it never fails to interest.
The trial of many javelins.
So many people.
I love that story.
It was just he just kept pulling out javelins. He never changed it up or anything.
Yeah.
It kept not working too.
Gonna start get back on Call of Duty and remake my gamer tag to King Saul and only use the javelin.
Incredible.
My sole weapon.
Keygun85 for $4.99 says, my wife and I listen to all of your podcasts. We love how you break down the Bible and are so glad you're back. Shout out to Savina. We are big fans.
Aw, thank you.
And Andrew Tall for $5 saying, assuming SCPs are real, are you pro or anti-Foundation?
That's a wild opener.
Really big question.
It has to be pro because there's so many. See, that's a cheat because it's like, are they moral? Are they good? No. But there's so many things in the series that if they don't exist, it's just like, oh, the universe explodes or something.
Yeah,
So
you kind of have to be pro SCP Foundation because the alternative ain't great.
Yeah, like
the alternative is 096s running around ruining lives.
At the same time, they shouldn't just be like, oh, we don't know what this thing does. Let's see how many D-class it can eat. Like,
yeah, exactly.
There's I don't like them, but they have to exist. So
I think, have you read the Staircase one? I'm trying to remember.
Mall Security.
What?
Nothing.
Well, have you read the one about the staircase that just infinitely goes down?
Yep.
That one bugged me a lot. I did not like that one.
Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff like that. Yeah, read so many of those.
Did you play any Lethal Company?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
There were some mods that put SCP stuff in there, and
I was gonna make a lore video about it, but I'm waiting for the dev. I talked to the dev. He's supposed to have some more stuff going into the game, so I'm waiting for some more lore to come out.
I tried to get his attention. I did not.
Slightly different levels of action.
I'm very curious. I'm looking at possibly trying to do a Helldivers lore video, but I'm just not sure that our channel would bite.
Yeah.
Just doesn't seem like
it is lore.
It is lore
for it.
Yeah.
So.
We built this whole lodge for the lore.
It's
nobody wants it. This is real wood now. For those watching,
it was all the other one was real wood, but this is on a wall.
Well, no, that one's real wood. The old podcast backdrop was just laminate.
It was good laminate.
It was good laminate.
Cat did a good job.
But this is physical wood that we, as men, attached to this wall.
I cut, he nailed.
Mm-hmm.
Wyatt Ginger for $9.99. Yeah, it's just we're rifling through it. So glad Weird Bible is back. Because of you fellas, I started reading the Bible and really dove into my faith. I started at Genesis a few months ago, and I just finished Job.
Nice. Oh, congratulations!
Wow,
awesome, man! If you got through the Pentateuch and everything after, you're home free.
Yeah, you're fine, boy.
Yeah, you're cooking.
Mr. Jin 608 for $20 says, hey guys, wanted to say you're cool and that Wendy's videos began my transition to the faith along with this podcast. Also, what is your opinion on the contentious authorship over the pseudo-epigraphica of John for most modern scholars?
You people, every question they have is like, hey guys, thanks, really enjoyed the show. What do you think of the ancient Latin texts that are going to be only understood on the fourth moon? Like,
it's been a long time. Hang on.
The pseudographa, is that what they asked about?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's John the Apostle, the son of Zebedee.
Yeah, what was the question around it?
How do you
feel about it?
Yeah, what are your opinions on
it? By
the
way, pseudo-epigraphica means that the claimed author is not the author.
Got it.
Correct. I don't believe it. I think it's just needless rigmarole. John of the disciples is the John of John and also the John of Revelation, in my opinion. Of Revelation 1, I'm more willing to believe it's not, but I'm pretty sure it is. But yeah, the John is John. John is John.
Yeah. John's the one who talks about beating Peter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What? Another John did that? Someone else wanted.
Also, I
And
was
then they
thinking,
lied at the end. Yeah.
I was thinking this when you were going over the last bit about Peter on the beach, and it obviously wasn't the time to bring it up. But I was wondering, do we think John threw in the little bit about beating Peter up to the tomb because he might have been a little salty about the fact that Peter was essentially dubbed the head of the church?
Sure.
Just a thought.
I'm just trying to. All right. I'm trying to figure out because it's been such a while since I looked at them. In addition to the sets of...
While you run through that, I'll just go through
for it.
ones that don't require much of a response other than a thank you. But Obi-Wan for $10 says Christ is King. And then Dovin Doragon for $5 says the main way I've learned of the betrayal is the video by Ethereal Snake. Not familiar, but Ethereal Snake.
I don't think I know that one.
Yeah, same. Aiden L, there's a third Aiden in here.
Good.
For $4.99 says you guys have brought thousands to Christ, including me. Thank you and God bless.
That means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm looking through. Because pseudo-epigraphica of John didn't sound familiar to me.
Fun one here from Crimson for $5 says a friend of mine is going to school for criminal psych. They're trying to join the FBI. I showed them your channels. Another confirmed Fed on the site.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Just adding it onto the list, I guess.
Are they arguing that... I guess what the argument is here is maybe that John itself is a pseudo-epigraphic? This is now I gotta...
You can keep rolling through questions while he's looking.
Yeah, the next few kind of require like proper responses, so I'm just reading.
Okay.
Yeah. Cromudgeon. Yeah, interesting spelling of curmudgeon, but I think for $20 says, "Let's go, brothers! He is risen." I would say
Yes.
Yee.
I think one of the dogs is attempting to come through the wall.
Sounds like it.
Q&A
I'm just...
right now. You want to come say hi?
I guess
Okay. We're in
maybe what
Q&A
they
right
mean
now.
is...
Mast 101 for 20 says gonna have to save this stream for work tomorrow. Have a wonderful night. Thank you. Same to you.
Appreciate it.
I guess maybe they're there is another book, not in the Bible, but another book that is supposed to be John. Let me see. Yeah, no. Yeah, so they're either talking about the idea that John was not the author of the Gospel of John, or there is I don't know if calling it a gospel is necessarily the right term, but there's another book of John that is not John, like almost certainly not John. But so I would assume the question was about the idea that John was not the author of the Gospel of John and John's letters, in which case, again, I would argue that the textual evidence suggests that he was. That's my opinion.
Yeah, it's I know. Yeah, I know the one you're talking about. Basically, the John in the Bible is John. The John out of the Bible, not John.
Yeah,
you're welcome.
The John that the people who compiled the Bible decided was actually John is probably the one who was John.
Believe it or not, they did their homework. Yeah. They thought about it before they did.
He thought about it. Lydium Gambit for $10 says, I'm a teenager and I just started teaching the 4 to 5 year olds at my church last week. What stories should I teach them? And how would I get the point across easily at that age? Keep up the good work.
I think at that age, honestly, the most important thing you can be teaching them is the good moral lessons. The positive stuff in the Bible, not the stuff that's taught as this person did this thing and that was bad, but this person did this thing and that was good, is probably the way to start off, because they're 4 to 5 years old. They're too young to grasp the more complicated aspects of things. So if you're going to teach them Samson, the way that you teach the story of Samson is to talk about how, is to talk about the good things he did. Which is a little difficult with Samson.
What about like Job? Maybe?
Yeah, Job would definitely don't teach Job to
Yeah,
kids.
that's it. Get
teach
into the
Job
whole
to
idea
kids.
of the morality of the morality of the trial against God as the
Yeah.
foundation for man and the war of the
Yeah, I think
A little more surface
you
level.
could probably do Daniel.
You should go to Ezekiel, talk about the wheels within the wheels.
I think Daniel would be a good book because it is one of the best written in my opinion. But it's also very, very simple. It is, or at least it can be very simple. It can be about Daniel, being a dream interpreter and Daniel going out of his way to try and sort of smooth things over, and Daniel not and Daniel choosing not to worship the idols, for example, despite the fact that it would have put him in danger. Things like that are nice and simple, that you don't have to talk about why something was morally gray. Morally gray areas are for when they're a little older and can comprehend it. At that age, you want to give them the stories that are going to be about why Christianity is a good thing. What are the good moral lessons of Christianity? I think the parables that Christ gives are great options. Prodigal son being one of the best ones, because that'll have parable of the prodigal son for a child has all sorts of applications. It could be as simple as them having friends on the playground, and the friend went away to play with other toys and came back. Like,
you just reminded me the whole question about being upset. The funny mustache man question. There is a part at the end of the prodigal son parable where one of the servants is mad that the father let the son back in.
That's why I was thinking it was the parable of the prodigal son.
The servant didn't forgive the son, and he's upset about it. Yeah.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking when that came up.
Yeah, you were onto something. I just didn't believe you.
All good. But yeah, so that's what I would say is start with the stuff that's kind of more black and white, people doing good things, and then you can talk about bad things when they're a little bit older. Thoughts, Isaiah? I know you've taught kids.
Oh yeah, I teach kids a lot. Basic, like, God's there for you. God's there for you when you're scared. David and Goliath, Gideon, Jericho, Joseph, coat of many colors, stuff like that. Yeah. There's your 4 weeks. You're welcome. There's a whole
Sodom and Gomorrah, great for the kids.
Yeah. Go to Sodom and Gomorrah. You should definitely go talking about the judge who slaughtered the woman and then displayed her bowels in front of the city.
Exactly.
I forget who that was. Yeah, it's great stuff.
A kid's got to grow up sometime, right?
Yeah.
Jack Garcia for $9.99 says, opinions on Judas being possessed. I personally think there's sufficient evidence to believe so. Jesus
not this. This shows up everywhere I go. This question,
right?
The free will of Judas.
Yeah, Jesus even said one of you have been chosen to fulfill the prophecy.
Yeah. So the whole argument is, if it was prophesied that Judas would betray Jesus, did Judas have free will? Was he possessed? Blah, blah, blah. There's some even who say, did Judas do it as a righteous act, knowing Jesus must be betrayed to carry out the scriptures? The answer to both of those is no. The way prophecy works is it doesn't dictate what happens in the future. It foretells things that have happened, things that already will, things that have already been written down, so to speak. It sees beyond time. It wasn't it wasn't the prophets dictating the acts of Judas later. It was Judas dictating his own actions, and then the prophets being informed of it. Now there's the argument, okay, could Judas have picked up a book and then read and then seen that someone betrayed him? Perhaps, but at the end of the day, he still did it. Whatever knowledge he had, whatever information he didn't change anything. He still betrayed Christ. So basically, no.
Got it.
Also, immediately after that happens, he's guilt-ridden and takes his own life. So,
did not know that bit.
He hangs himself with the rope of a donkey.
Wow.
Yep. He tries to return the silver that he took from the Pharisees, and they don't want it. So he gets rid of the silver, then hangs himself in a field. And according to a lot of the New Testament, sorry, not New Testament, early Catholic leaders and stuff, they would elaborate on this. And there was one account, I forget who said that Judas was so fat and rotten that when he hung himself, his body ripped in half and he exploded.
Oh, good Lord. That sounds like something out of a like
Yeah,
7.
they really hated Judas. I mean, for good reason. But the reason that all the depictions of Judas, he looks like a rat, or he has like comedically evil features and stuff, is because that's how like he was taught for years. It's like, well, Jesus had 11 people who loved and followed him, and then one that was the devil, and he like smelled really bad and was 500 pounds. There's one like early cardinal or whatever who said Judas was so large he could not fit through the gates of a city. Like,
Lord.
they just said whatever they wanted about this guy to be mean.
Oh, that's brutal. Yeah, I mean, it just that just makes me think of like potential skits where it's like, oh God, which one of us could it be? And then everybody just looks at the
Yeah.
one most
Jeez,
evil
I wonder
incarnate
who.
person.
Yeah. Have you
Uh,
seen it's sacrilegious a bit, so I dare not mention on Easter one, but there's it's some British comedy show, I forget what, but they do a skit where the Terminator goes back in time to save Jesus.
No, but
And like
that's
he shows up to the Last Supper and kills Judas, and Jesus is like, this isn't, we're not doing this, this is supposed to happen, you have to let this go through. And he heals Judas, and Judas comes back, and the Terminator shoots him again, and they keep doing that. Jesus is like, stop, quit, I'm going to do it again, don't do it. And then the Terminator's like, but I want to save you. And he's like, no, this is supposed to happen. Yeah. It's sacrilege, but it does crack me up.
no, I haven't seen that, but I have seen. There's one TikTok that this guy did. This might be sacrilege too, but I enjoyed watching it. Was one guy like gets a wish, and he's
Someone
like,
clip that. Someone clip that.
yeah.
This might be sacrilege, but I enjoy watching it. So.
And it's this guy, and he's doing a TikTok where he gets like one wish, and his wish is to go back and see Jesus preach like in real life. And he's there, and Jesus is speaking in his native tongue, and then all of a sudden he looks directly at the guy and he says in perfect English, "You're not supposed to be here." And then suddenly the guy's back in present day.
See those things before, yeah.
They're
those
so
are
good.
You're not, like, he's speaking Hebrew. You're not supposed to be.
Yeah. And it's just like, yeah, just immediate like shock and terror.
Yeah, that's really good.
I guess we'll keep going for the moment. SKN for an R5490 says, why does the Last Supper kind of feel like when the infiltrated ATF officer visiting the Waco compound before the siege, the scenery, not the participants? And yes, I just rewatched the Waco siege.
That is the second time that we have compared David Koresh to Jesus, and we need to quit now.
Yeah, I don't think we get a third.
We filled our quota. No more.
Incredible. Already did that one. Smashed 101 for $20 says, gonna save this. Oh no, we already did that one as well. Oh, here we go. Ironic statement for $5 says, what are your opinions on Mel Gibson's The Passion? Do y'all make it an Easter tradition to watch? Do y'all like the David Lynch devil baby scene, etc.?
Not a huge fan. Mel Gibson was doing it because he saw a niche in the market and thought he can make money. So his reasons for making it are kind of weird.
Define funny.
Not like smoke.
I thought someone was burning a candle.
There is a candle over there.
Oh.
It just blew out. Amanda texted me to walk out there. She was right. It's like kind of easy out there.
In the apartment?
Yeah.
Did anybody check the hallway?
Amanda, did you check the hallway? Hello?
Sorry, we're in the middle of figuring out if something is burning.
No, it's funny.
It's probably because I made the comment of it may be sacrilege, but I enjoy watching it. That's probably what's causing it.
Zap.
Yeah, it's. Anyway, yeah. So
what was the question? Remind me what the question was.
I can answer that. I have not seen Passion of the Christ.
Yeah,
really
the thoughts on
Passion of the Christ. That's right. Yeah. So it's basically I don't really like the reasons he made it for. It's kind of like, yes, some of the imagery is powerful and I think it works. Like the brutality. I think it's the only depiction that's got across how brutal the cross was, right? But it's like it's kind of weird on some of the religious iconography of it. It doesn't so much get across the sorrow of the cross as much as it relishes in the agony of it. But I mean, I don't think it's wrong to watch or anything. I've seen it, and it does get emotional moments for me. Especially that there is one shot I really love where Mary, the mother of Jesus, is watching him carry his cross, and when he falls with it, she imagines him as a young boy falling, and she wants to go to him to help him up, but she can't because it's the soldiers. That moment has stuck with me ever since I watched it. That was really cool.
Is that the one with Jim Caviezel as
Yeah.
Christ? Have you seen the interview with Caviezel?
About him getting struck on a cross? About he got struck by lightning while he was on the cross?
Yeah.
I don't know what to make of that.
And the things he
I
said
try
that
not
he
to make
heard.
anything of it. Yeah.
I remember
know.
seeing
I don't
that
know
back
about
when
it.
the whole movie was coming out a few years ago, and I was surprised by that.
What, that he got struck by lightning on the cross?
No, just like the whole story he told was interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Have you watched? He gave a speech at some kind of rally where he talked about that experience too. It was interesting.
Yeah.
Saw it when we were doing the Sound of Freedom video.
What was Scorsese's Christ movie?
It's coming out. He's
Okay.
making it right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought that wasn't out yet.
He made the
first one.
Last Temptation of Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But wasn't the Last Temptation of Christ
It's
like
not a religious movie.
blasphemous?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
aggressively
I agree.
blasphemous.
It's extremely sacrilege.
Isn't
really?
it about Jesus being gay?
No, it's about him like being okay. So it's about the temptation in the wilderness, and Jesus, played by Willem Dafoe, like witnesses all of the joys he could have in the world. So there's a lot of like orgy scenes and like women shown to him and stuff like that. Like,
Gotcha.
No.
Interesting.
I knew it was something that it was like that doesn't seem right.
Another story probably not to teach the kids.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Cripple for £5 says, "Hi, you said the funny word of rooster. Love from someone hoping to convert to Catholicism in a sectarian country or sectarian country."
I wonder which country.
Secretary.
Wait, what was the, how much was it for?
It's a country run by horses.
Pounds? I'm
Congratulations.
guessing you're in Northern Ireland if you used pounds. Good luck.
Yeah. Jack Manson for $5 says, "I just got my foot washed by our preacher when we then had rolls, cheese, and lemon squares at his house."
You know what? Vibes. All right.
Fair enough.
What's next?
Spaz the Space Wizard for $2 says, "How biblically accurate do SMT angels look like?"
SMT?
I don't know.
What is SMT?
I'm a little worried.
Yeah, go on to the next question.
Angels.
Aaron Moore for $5.88.
No, they're not. I'm immediately looking at these. No, they're
not
they have
remotely.
curves and they're yeah. Go away.
That is no.
Got it.
Next question.
That looks more
Incorrect
like
buzzer.
fairies or fae or something. Aaron Moore for $5.88. Love the specificity. 3 weeks cold turkey off vaping and nicotine and having bad cravings right now, so I'm spending my money on something better. Happy Betrayal Day. I love you guys.
Betrayal Day.
Betrayal Day. It is Betrayal Day, I
It
guess.
is Betrayal Day.
True.
I mean,
Congratulations
just
on quitting. Stay strong at it.
yeah, and I will say, one of our channel sponsors on the Lore Lodge is for that purpose.
Yeah.
If you want to give it a shot, it's called Fume. I have one here.
Yeah.
I don't
It's
know.
not legally for that.
It's not
purpose.
legally for that. We're not allowed to say that, but that is what it's for. I'm legally I can't tell you to use this to quit smoking, but I can tell you that I used it to quit smoking when I drink on occasion.
Yeah, I was wondering where. I wasn't gonna say anything, but
Occasionally, you're out and about. Everybody's like, whipping out a cigarette, and you're like, I'll have a cigarette.
they whip out the pipe and tobacco.
I saw somebody smoking pipe tobacco on the street like a week ago.
Yeah, I believe it.
Phenomenal.
It's probably Vincent.
It wasn't.
Oh, really?
No.
What else next? SKN for $10.90 says opinions on Orthodox religions.
Like Orthodox Christianity?
Probably.
I think it's cool.
Also, we're on the last two questions that came in from before 9:38.
Yeah, I am as far as the more organized sects go, I am a fan of the Orthodoxy. In general, I like the aesthetics, I like the art, I like a lot of the theology. I'm more partial to Orthodoxy than Catholicism. But at the same time, there's a reason I'm a Protestant. I could convert to Orthodoxy in a heartbeat. It would not be a problem. I have chosen to remain Protestant for a few reasons, but I do like the Orthodoxy. What about you, Isaiah? Any thoughts, or are you just sleepy?
Protestant gang.
Isaiah's EP baby.
Protestant gang rise up.
Incredible. All right, second to last one here from Wandering Madman for $5 says, do you think Nicodemus, being well studied, knew what was to come and prepared for Jesus' death?
It would not surprise me.
It's an interesting idea.
The fact that he
he could. He definitely could.
Yeah, the fact that he brought things suggests that at some part of him definitely thought this could be God. This could be the Son of Man. This could be the Messiah.
Well, wasn't that the whole point of what you said in that story?
Yeah, he definitely agreed with that. I think the question is, did he know the crucifixion was about to happen? Quite possibly. Or at least whenever he heard that he was being put on trial, he knew how that would end up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's possible.
It would be fair to call him a Christian.
Yeah. Well, he is explicitly mentioned as a Christian after the resurrection.
Gotcha. Okay.
The level of preparation.
If I recall right, in Acts, he's mentioned as one of the early church founders, along with like Stephen and Peter and stuff.
Acts is one of the ones that I've read like once, and I need to go back and read it more.
Last one here is from Sequitur Tenebris for $19.99, saying, so two things. The vinegar drink Jesus was given, which has split people on act of kindness or not. And also, do you think Pilate was saved, possibly, in secret, given the risk of it at the time? Sorry if I missed something. So I think...
there's well, check your phone, right? Because you took a picture of the last one.
Yeah, no, that is the last one, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. The whole Pilate thing's been debated. There's like Jesus did kind of forgive him there, so I think the overall motive of it is to forgive him. That being said, there's been other people argue his guilt in it, like that the whole I wash my hands of this man is just for show, and at the end of the day, he did persecute Christ. I don't know. I think God's saying that he who has delivered you to me has committed the greater sin.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he's to be held. If he was to become a Christian, I think it's very possible. There were a ton of people in Rome who converted to Christianity. Eventually, Rome itself converts to Christianity. Now, their praxis when they do this is to burn down Jerusalem, so they were kind of missing the point a little bit. But
they did that before they converted.
They had the spirit, you know.
they listen. They burned down. They destroyed Jerusalem in like what 130 AD,
70.
I thought they were. Oh yeah, I always mix up when it was destroyed and when the Jews were expelled because they're two different dates.
Yeah, the temple's destroyed in 70.
Yeah, 70, and then the Jews are expelled in 130, 132. Yeah. So yeah, they don't convert until like 385. They took a while.
Took a while, but anyway, but there was a bunch of people converting. I think it's very reasonable to believe that we see. I think his name's Caiaphas. I mentioned him earlier, but there's a Roman like senator who has a vision of an angel and has Peter come to his house to tell him of Christ, and him and his whole family are saved. So we know the people high up within the Roman government were saved and were witnessing to each other. So yeah, I think Pilate being saved is a very high possibility for sure.
Yeah.
There was another part to that question.
And it was the vinegar drink Jesus was given, which has people split on being kindness or not.
I've seen translations of that as sour wine rather than vinegar.
I've heard someone made a case before. I've listened to a case before about why the vinegar would have been seen as a positive act. I can't remember what that was, so I'm going to go with my gut and say it was a negative act.
So the case that it was positive it basically says that this was a common drink for Roman legionnaires.
I see.
And that it was just kind of a field ration kind of deal because wine and vinegar are derived from the same kind of thing. Even the words themselves have the same etymology. So I'm not going to give you a definite, but I would say it very easily could have been a merciful kind of thing. It just depends on what they actually gave him.
Yeah.
Well, that wraps it for the questions tonight, but I know some people are upset that we weren't able to get to yours, so we'll do what we can to make sure that next time, at the beginning of question time, we can try and come back to these. Is that something we could do? partly just because we were delayed in the beginning, and partially because it's kind of getting late. We need to wrap up here. But in order to make sure your questions are answered, not leave anybody out in the dark, we'll answer any questions that came in after the last one for next time. And ideally next time, please get all the questions in prior to when we start question time. That way we have a definitive
Wouldn't hurt to have maybe not for our next monthly episode, because that would maybe deprive it a little bit, but wouldn't hurt to have a bonus episode of just
That's what I was
Q&A.
thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I usually do reaction streams on Thursdays. Isaiah, would you want to pop on one of those to go through these questions?
I can hop on one for sure. Yeah, no promises
All right.
as to when, but yeah.
I
for
also
sure.
it doesn't have to be a Thursday. I can do it basically any night of the week. But yeah, if
Cool.
you and I can figure out a time that we can each hop on and just go through the remaining ones, and then we can give you guys some notice so that everybody can make sure they're there.
Sounds good.
All right.
Cool. Well,
And there's some questions left over from the in-person one too about Samson, so we should take a
Mhm.
look at those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
all right, gentlemen.
All right.
Good stuff.
Sounds good. Well, thank you everybody for coming, for hanging out, for watching. Definitely sorry that we couldn't get through all of the super chats tonight. Got away from us in a way that we didn't expect.
Sorry about that, guys.
It's fine. But all right, yeah. So thank you guys so much. New Lore Lodge tomorrow.
Yep, I will be up until at least 3 tonight getting that finished. So check it out if you have time.
Yeah. All right. Isaiah, any announcements you want to give while we're here?
Happy Easter.
All right. Well, that's what you heard. Happy Easter, everybody. And to our, I don't know if they fall at the same time this year, but to our Jewish friends, happy Passover.
Indeed.
All right. Well, it's been real. I will see you guys on the next one.